the glare hits, and then I zoom in, right? And then all of a sudden, I look at the glare, and it is the corner of a Sony Handycam. So I see a hand, and now I've confirmed there's a person in this vehicle. Diesel 6, we're talking back and forth. A hand is coming out, right? And he goes, Pasciuti, take the shot, right? Breaking protocol, because in the military, we don't say names. And he goes, Pasciuti, take the shot. I am now shooting through a medium. So when I shoot through the glass, I have no control of what happens to the bullet after that, because it shoots something and it affects the trajectory. There's civilians by, right? And I've got to make a shot right now. What I say is, okay, I'm going to shoot one round to punch a hole in the glass, and then I'm going to put two more right behind it. Roger, take the shot.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. This is the second round of our two-part combat story with former Force Recon, Scout Sniper, and Marine Rifleman AJ Pasciuti, who recently retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 3 gunner and passed on more lucrative careers in the defense industry to keep a promise he and his fellow Marines made after losing some of their closest friends in combat, to lead a purpose and service-driven life as he runs for public office in his hometown. AJ was an unlikely candidate to be the Marine Corps sniper who, as part of the team, was responsible for killing the most lethal sniper in Iraq, known as Juba. Juba took the lives of allegedly 140 plus Americans using a US-issued sniper rifle taken off the bodies of a fallen Marine Corps sniper team. AJ is credited with ultimately pulling the trigger on Juba, but in true Marine Corps fashion and very much in line with AJ's character, he has forever eschewed the spotlight and attributed the work to the team of Marines that stopped Juba. Juba was personified in the movie American Sniper, and he stopped them from terrorizing other U.S. forces. In a very sad and emotional but inspiring turn of events, AJ would lose a coin flip in which his closest friend Matthew Ingham's team would take the decisive position on a deadly operation in Afghanistan, while AJ's team served a supporting role. During the operation, and while fighting from only a terrain feature away, AJ would lose this Marine and friend during a multi-hour gunfight. With that, please enjoy this inspiring story that was made for the big screen, from the son of an immigrant to one of the Marine Corps' most lethal shooters, AJ Pasciuti. All right, so round two here. Let's start off with something important.
Part two.
The
longer, shittier sequel.
If you're still here, we're impressed.
Right.
When do you pick up the nickname Fruity Pasciuti?
Oh, Aaron. That might have been pretty early on. Okay, so one of the cool parts about being from Northern California, I hate that you goaded me into this. I feel like I've been ambushed. Right? I'm trained against ambushes. Is being from Northern California is a very eclectic community. And I mixed with a lot of people in the Marine Corps that were not from they were from very homogenous communities. And so they would always ask questions. And there was when I was in high school. Golly, the internet's forever. Oh man. This is before I knew the internet was forever. There was a problem that was happening inside of the Boy Scouts, and it had to do with, I think, the Boy Scouts and their stance on the LGBTQ plus community. And because I think that they were like religiously kind of hazy thing. And so I got interviewed about something from the Sunnyvale Sun. I can't believe I'm giving you the source on this thing. And the only line anyone ever remembers from that is, I do a lot of theater and I know a lot of gay people.
So I looked hard for this article and could not find it.
Well, I've given you the source.
But I'm going to go to
just like
the library
2020
downtown,
or something like, or sorry, 2000, something like that.
Yeah, right.
Oh man, it is. And so when people would Google my name in the Marine Corps, I don't know why, they would be like, oh yeah, I literally have this coolest statue from sniper school when I left. And it's like this bronze, like Marine in a ghillie suit, like stalking whatever. And on it, it says, to Poopy Pasciuti, right? I do a lot of theater and I know a lot of gay people. So Again, when anybody talks about like
so good,
I am so, God, I'm ruined.
So wait, I forgot to mention theater, and then during one of our breaks, you were singing a little bit, and it reminded me. So wait, where does that come up as a kid?
I was a thespian in high school.
Uh-huh.
What I really wanted to be was an actor. And I really wanted to get into the big screen. That was my dream, was to be an actor. And so like Tom Cruise, I felt like I'd be like a mixture between, Tom Cruise, George Clooney, if they had a kid, kind of thing.
It's no big deal.
Yeah. And so my very first play in high school, godly, I can't believe we're talking about this, is I was Johnny Casino in the musical Grease. So I got to sing the hand jive, right? Like whatever that was, right? I did that. That was my
wow.
And then I was in my biggest break as an actor. I was in the play as a junior, Clue. I was Mr. Green in the show Clue, and I absolutely loved it. That's really what I wanted to do. And then the Taliban went and ruined that for me. Right?
You were like, I'm going to go make more money here. At the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
One of the guys I've interviewed is a guy named Jason Lilly, who was in so you have a very similar path, it sounds like, but he was in the unit that's featured in Generation Kill.
I know Lilly.
And he auditioned for his own role and they said no. So I think you're a step ahead of him in his thespian dreams.
We had a friend of ours, his name is Taryn. I won't give his last name because he's probably still working. He was characterized in the show Generation Kill. But the caricature that they portrayed, or the character that they portrayed, is nothing like Taryn. So he was like in the TV show, he was like some African-American guy from like the inner city who was like very kind of like thuggish kind of thing. Taryn is anything but that. And so we were in Okinawa, Japan together. And so we would make fun of him relentlessly. Because that's all we do is give each other crap, right? So we would we were terrible to him, right? And he's like, y'all racist, right? Kind of like all the time, right? And we're like, oh yeah, because he is the most eloquent, smartest, and most capable Marine I've ever met. And
that's how they portray him in the movie.
It was like not good. It was like the most like the token kind of thing. It was like super bad. So naturally, instead of being sensitive to it, we just dive right into it.
But that's what I miss so much about the military, man, that side of it.
You show one sliver of weakness and it is like game on. And so an article that says, I do a lot of theater and I know a lot of gay people.
It's so good.
You build 1,000 bridges, right? Man. So I used to say like, I could do all these things overseas. And they're like, yeah, but.
Like, well, the guy who got Lily's role went on to like star in Twilight.
Oh, really?
So when Lily was at GRS with the agency, that was his call sign. Was Twilight. So talk about never being able to live something down. Like that's a pretty good one too.
Rudy Reyes got the part. He got to play himself.
So that's what Aaron thought your nickname came from, was you may have been like a Rudy Reyes type personality.
Yeah, I know Rudy. And so I've seen, and he is still ripped as ever. And he is still doing a bunch of acting gigs and he's still out there. I saw him at the Recon Challenge this last May, and just looking and cruising, doing his thing, right? Yeah, Rudy Reyes.
All right.
We had like there was like a calendar that was produced at one point and they had like the Men of Recon or whatever it was. And,
were you on it?
No. You see, like, come on. Right. Like some like slithery little sniper, right? Like
I could see Gunnery Sergeant Jackson getting you prepped for that.
I have been known, to get there, but I've thinned out a little bit.
All right. So I'm probably going to jump pretty far ahead here. One of the things that was alluded to.
This coffee is much better now.
All right. Because it's got sugar?
Yeah.
All right.
I was just being tough.
One of the things that you had alluded to you didn't even allude to it. Somebody else, when they introduced you at the Vet Gala, was a sniper on sniper event that you were a part of. And I mean, I'm bringing it up begrudgingly with you. I can tell, like, you probably get asked about it a lot. It's not something that happens that frequently, I think, downrange. But from what I understand, the story behind it is there's loss on the U.S. side and there's a lot of meaning at the end that comes away from it with what you recover.
Mhm.
So I was hoping you could talk through that series of events. Have not heard this before, and not trying to glorify hunting humans, but just what goes into it.
It was his choice to pick up that rifle.
Right.
So I guess the reason why I talk about it now is for a long time I downplayed or denied involvement, because the problem for me is that people are often looking to try to place and find an image or a thing and then create something more than it is. What I felt was that, I guess why I've stepped forward a little bit more about it now is I had found opportunities in my career where I saw people were monetizing that, or claiming something that they didn't do. So when it initially happened, the very first article that came out about it, it was by the Marine Corps Times, and then Soldier of Fortune both picked it up, and because it was a really cool thing. It's kind of poetic, and I'll explain the whole story. But the reason why is I just said 21-year-old Marine sniper, and I think it says from San Jose, California, is what it says in it, because it wasn't like I was the person who pulled the trigger, but it was a team that put us there, right? And it was a huge effort, a huge undertaking that just took a long time and a lot of man hours to be able to go into it. And I just happened to be on the guy in the gun. So, and anybody else would have done the same thing had they been in the position, which I'll tell you a funny story about that too. So there's three parts to the story. The first part is that in 2004, there was a sniper platoon from 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, which is underneath the 5th Marine Regiment. That's a longer story, but they are a sister battalion of ours. And so we would often train with them, and have, because again, coalition kind of working together. So we would, in passing, see one another. And these 4 Marines were in Iraq, in Ramadi specifically, and were using a hide site. Now, I had some obvious consternation with the way that Marine commanders think about Marine snipers. I also have consternation with Marine commanders employing Marine snipers who have no understanding of what snipers cannot do, and really the way
the commanders not understanding the capability.
Very much so. There's a lot of hubris inside of the military and a lot of ego that happens. And so when a commander is threatened by something, they oftentimes kind of lean harder into it. And it's just kind of the male ego sometimes, or just the Marine ego. So anyways, these 4 Marines were on a rooftop and they were reoccupying a hide site, which is a big no-no for snipers. So you go there every single day. Also part of our tactics is we do not use snipers in overt positions. So you think about like snipers on the White House. There's a reason why they're on the White House and you can see them. It's a deterrent, right?
Yeah.
To let people know. It's kind of a show of force. In combat, what that does is that puts people in vulnerable positions. And so the idea is, what we liked to do is be able to, work from within the shadows, right? Well, that snipers didn't have the option. They were directed to use that position over and over and over again. And on the first floor of that building was some renovation that was going on. It was like a shop that was getting worked on, or there was some sort of pattern of life of where there were people moving in and out of it constantly. So it was an overt position at a static location with a lot of movement down below. A very long story, short, that also gets kind of hazy. And then the Marine Corps has a little bit of like, CYA in it as well, is that what was explained to the Marine Corps was that the 4 Marines fell asleep on their post and then were ambushed. Well, nobody actually knows what happened, right? We know from talking with people and kind of piecing this together that there was a gunfight that happened. The Marines were caught off guard as the people who ambushed them came through the door, and then the 4 Marines were in different locations, but there was a lot of signs of struggle and a lot of signs of fighting back. So the idea that they were sleeping, and then like the rumors start, right? Oh. People saying, like, well, they had iPods in and this and that, and right. And like, it's very easy. And you'll see this a lot where people kind of almost like to vilify special operations or things like that, because it's very easy. So think about it, like a headline is easy to catch. 4 SEALs do X, right? It's like, oh, got them, right? They like to see the people who are kind of skyrocketing fall. It's like a weird kind of thing that we associate. So when 4 Marine snipers were killed, a lot of things happened inside of that. And so, but the true answer is, in the post-analysis, the Marine Corps doesn't know what happened in there. We just know that when they were killed, their equipment was taken with them. And then that birthed this kind of counter sniper, or this sniper movement from the Mujahideen. And they produced a lot of propaganda through ogreish.com, through like Al Jazeera. And what they started to do was they started to, this is the second part of the story. After the Marines were killed, Corporal Tommy Parker was the team leader, if I'm not mistaken, and his rifle was taken. So now this Marine sniper rifle is in the hands of the enemy, which is bad for us. And the second part of the story is where this person has this Marine sniper rifle and goes on a killing spree for 2 years. Hundreds of people, hundreds of American service members, and he is broadcasting them online and watching. So one of the sniper kind of sayings is, you kill one, you terrorize 1,000. Well, he had the coalition force panicking. We didn't know what to do. How do we react to it? It's defensive measures. We put nets on things. We put bulletproof glass on things. Well, the sniper can move through all that kind of stuff, right? And you never know where he's at. Well, one of his downfalls was, in fact, his hubris. So part of the idea of propaganda puts your information for the entire world to see. And so we paid attention. And so our sniper platoon, remember we had 22 snipers at the time, specifically Banshee 2, which was the team that I worked with or in that time frame. And then eventually I took over my own team halfway through the deployment, Banshee 4. We paid attention. And so I watched every single video that what his name was Juba, the Juba Sniper. And they would always start off their videos with a call to prayer. And the call to prayer was a militarized call to prayer where it had horses neighing, it had drums beating, and then it would have him in a mask talking about the one true God, right? And that he will smite the heads of the enemies, right? Because that comes from the Quran, right? And then he would have these pieces, and then he would then pan into his exploits effectively. And so I watched hundreds of American service members die.
Wow.
And watch their final moments. And again, it's heart-wrenching to watch, because these young Americans, men and women, had no idea their last moments on life were about to happen. And then this man shot them.
What were you looking for?
Patterns. And so being observant is what keeps me alive and kept me alive for so long and keeps me sharp. And so what we looked for were patterns. What we saw was that normally what would happen was, one, he was very close to his target. So since he was close to his target, that meant 2 things. 1, he was an untrained shooter, or 2, it was within the limits of the video camera that he was using, because he had to be able to video his exploits. So there was 2 limitations. Again, there's like, we go through a thing that's called Combat Hunter, right? And it was taught by this really cool, foundation of looking for patterns, an FBI profiler with, Marines kind of layering on, like trying to find patterns, right? Things that you recognize, ways that you watch people. We gleaned a lot of it from the FBI, from the agency itself, right? Just to pay attention to the way that people will tell you how to treat them. And so we learned to be able to watch the same things, right? So I'm watching these videos. So what would happen was, he would be within what I presumed was anywhere from 100 to 200 meters, was kind of the normal range. The shot would crack. The soldier, sailor, airman, Marine would fall. Chaos would ensue on the ground for the coalition forces. And then what would normally happen was chaos would kind of ensue for the surrounding area. So during the shot, or during the camera, view, or during his videos, you would see people walking by, right? And they would just kind of like casually walk by in front of the camera. Well, that gave us 2 options. Either the entire population was complicit and he was in some sort of hide site, and now everybody was complicit with his crimes, or he was hiding from them too. because I don't think that it's in the best interest of an Iraqi civilian to be walking while a sniper's laying in the open, waiting for a shot to crack out at the coalition. Self-preservation says it. So again, I'm leaning towards specific things. So now the population doesn't know he's there either. And then what would happen is after the shot would crack out, there'd be a little bit of kind of like movement on the camera, and then they would move away from the scene of the crime at a general fast rate of speed without bouncing. And so again, it was a Sony Handycam kind of at the time. They didn't have, gyro stabilized kind of stuff. So when you're filming, you remember like the old, Disneyland videos, you'd be bouncing, right? So it told us one thing, that he was, keeping it was always at like waist level too. So it was a very, like, people would pass by and be like at waist level. So we had like CSI this thing. And so it told us that we believed that at the end of it, he was in a vehicle, right? So the camera was in a vehicle at a low enough position that it's not coming from a position up here. People are walking by it. We're seeing their hips kind of at that level. And then the shot would fire, and then slow rate of, or kind of an average rate of speed without bouncing. So he was hiding himself in a vehicle. That was kind of what we looked for. And we're like, all right, cool. That's kind of paints us into a picture. Well, then the deployment goes on, and we're hunting down in the Zidon and in an area called Amaria and Faristown. And, the hunting is good, right? We're in an area of where the Mujahideen had a lot of, exploits when it came to like IED and IED emplacement. And so they put snipers down there, and snipers just wreaked havoc on them. And so it changed the face. But eventually what happens is, you go into an area, you affect the area by taking out the people that are causing the problems, the area goes dry. So we just kept moving to different little hotspots. We just hunted the entire deployment.
With this lingering
always
Juba.
Always. And so we were always thinking about that. So fast forward, we're in an area, we're in a place called OP Falcons. OP Falcons is on a road called Route Michigan. OP is observation position, Falcons were Fallujah is to our east, Ramadi is to our west. So my sniper team is now at OP Falcons, and we helped establish OP Falcons. So we had Captain Len Coleman is the company commander for India Company, and he's a Chicago native. And so we had bears and cubs, and then falcons. So I guess, heavy is the crown, right? Yep. So he gets to name his teams, so we have bears and cubs, and then falcons is to the south of Route Michigan, an east-west running road. And so we're at OP Falcons, and we have dead space in front of it, just a little bit of dead space. We're on a hill, and the infantry platoon is with us. So platoons will cycle out, but the sniper teams will go with them, and we cover an area, and we just go hunting, and everyone goes on patrols, and it's just kind of our presence. Well, there's an area of dead space between Route Michigan and OP Falcons where we're on a hill, but there's like a series of houses that we just cannot see. I can see all the road, they can see all the road, and then we have this space that we can't see. Well, one day what happens is we watch the Mujahideen kind of go forward, and they start, one of the infantry guys calls up, and they're like, hey, we think we see something. And so the snipers get up on their guns. Another embarrassing story. Oh my God. So we get on the guns, and we have myself, I get on the gun first. We have these little spider holes that we built into these little things so I can sit back. I have a position. I have two people on a road digging an ID, like the perfect, what we call a template match, like the perfect thing, like ready to go, right? Like 847 meters. So it's not exactly a very close shot for us. And there's a ton of things I have to get through to get my shot to this person. And so they're like, we got blah, blah, blah. We can only hit him with snipers. They're like, bad shit. And so they put us up. I get on the gun. I have the entire infantry platoon behind me,
watching,
willing me to take this shot. And they're like, Roger, we're cleared from higher. Pasciuti, take the shot. And I'm like, yeah, ready. And people are calling in winds, but I got my spotters calling in distance and that whole platoon. And they're like, we're on up, we're watching. Get him, Pasciuti. I think you can guess what happens by my reaction here.
Thinking you don't hit him.
Well, so I shoot. And so City Boy understands that still hunting a mammal is the same across mammals, right? So the round cracks over his head and he freezes, right? Because pow, he hears the supersonic boom as it cracks over his head. I miss him high. Well, then Jared Ramsey, gets on another gun, and we do an Israeli tactic for what's called frame shooting, where if we don't know the distance, what we'll do is, so frame shooting is a really cool concept of like, if you don't know the distance, you'll have two shooters have different holds in elevation, and they'll send two bullets at the same time, being able to cover that, whatever, we don't know if it's 900 or 700. So we'll have, he puts his dope, which is his windage and elevation at 700, I'll put mine on 900, and we'll try to split the difference. And the same thing happens for windage, for left and right. And so I tell him, I think I missed high. And so he's like, Roger, I'll, aim low. And then we're going to fire together to send two bullets down at this guy who's now starting to kind of panic. This is all happening very, very fast. And we're like, ready, 5, 4, 3, 2. We fire on the T of 2. Bam, we both shoot. The guy drops, right? And the platoon erupts. And they all go over to Jared, right? And they're like, great shot, Jared, right? You're the best. And they're like, yeah, whatever, this guy, right? So I'm like this big in this whole thing. Well, so what happens is this. Then we see a vehicle roll up to the person who's on the ground, right? And they don't have a red crescent on it, right? We're in this weird area of where, when we're in an insurgency, so we're not underneath a lot of the rules of war are kind of convoluted. And so this vehicle rolls up and they're starting to provide like crawl to him to get him aid. And so what happens is I don't shoot, and none of us, we're like, nope, that is an enemy rendering aid to another enemy. We let that one go. Well, 2 days later, my battalion commander is out touring the battlefield and he hears about it. So he comes to congratulate the snipers on their kill, right? And then we tell him the story and he goes, why didn't you shoot the vehicle? And we're like, well, we didn't think he was a combatant. He wasn't marked. And he's like, no, if they're helping that enemy out and they're not marked in this, rules of war fashion, they're combatants. And I said, okay, got it, sir. Understood. And so that fast forwards to the couple days later, right? What happens is OP Falcon's dead space. We can't cover this thing. A track is going up and down the route Michigan. So what we do is we are on the border of Ramadi, and on the 5-5 easting, we have the western edge of the Marine Corps' battle space and the eastern edge of the Army's battle space. When we first established in this area, we took over a National Guard battle space when we moved in. When we took over this battle space, I think it was like 1st of the 509th or something like that. And we were talking with them. They were like, there's a sniper in this area, be careful. And so they gave us, so when we go into the Army calls it a talk, we call it a COC. And so we go in and we're looking at the map board, right? The pin board, all these incidents. Sniper attack, sniper attack, sniper attack. And I'm like, holy manoli. And we're talking to the Army intel guys, like, there's a sniper who lives in this area who's working it. And they're giving us all these instances of single round attacks that have killed a service member or seriously maimed a service member. So we start playing CSI on this. So our platoon starts to go and we take the map and we have this thing called red cell and we turn the map around, right? How would I do this? So I find a location on a map and our platoon goes out and we find this location where there was a single round shot and there was a service member who was killed at this location. And so now I'm going there in the middle of the
physically,
night.
You're going there.
We go there in the middle of the night, right? So our platoon, I think it was like a couple of teams that kind of came out and we go there and I'm literally in the middle of the night standing in the middle of this road. Where would I have killed this person from? And we're looking around and then we're like, okay, I think that I would have done it from that building. So we go inside the building, right? We move the family to the side, right? Because it's occupied, right? We move the family to the side. They're pissed off, obviously, right? But I always operate from a sense of moral north, right? And that's one of the things any commander will ever talk about with me is I've always maintained that moral north. So anyways, we took care of them. We moved the family to the side, obviously, just give us a minute. So we cruise up and we're like looking through the house, right? And then I go up to the roof of the building. And if you remember, like the roofs of the building in Iraq, they have like a wall and then like a very flat space, not like our roofs, right? And the flat space is usually covered with tar or like it's where they sleep at night during the summer if they don't have AC. And we're looking around and I go over and I see a mat. And so the mat that they used was almost think of like a New York taxi cab, how they have the little beads, you know, like little bead mats like that. It was exactly that kind of mat, and it was laying in the thing, which is not uncommon for the area because that's what they would sleep on or whatever it was. But then I look and I see a spider hole. So now there's a spider hole, a 2 to 3 inch hole
in the wall.
And then I look down at the spider hole and I'm seeing the intersection. And then I look at what's called a target indicator. A target indicator is classified that you learn through repetition in sniper school is anything a sniper does or fails to do that reveals his presence, equipment, or location to the enemy.
It's very specific wording.
Very much.
Tell, like yeah.
Pain and repetition.
Yep. Yeah, fair.
But I've learned that repetition. One of the things that reveals a sniper's presence, location, or equipment is his brass. And so we have this rule in sniper school that if you get caught leaving your brass anywhere, that is a fate worse than death, right? And so you learn the hard way. And so they try to train that out of you, which is for good reason. Next to that mat were 2 brass casings from a 7.62 American-made weapon system. And I looked at it, and it said on the back, it said Lakes, or LC for Lake City. It's where our ammunition is made. And I went, oh shit.
You found it.
I found it.
This
is this guy's stuff. And he's using an American system. So now we know. Now we know who we're dealing with, and he's in the area. And so we start hunting. And this is every mission after that is starting to be able to hunt this guy. So now fast forward OP Falcons. The dead space comes into position. A track is leaving the 5. So what we always do to be able to manage the 5.5 easting is we have a tank, an M1A1, or we have an AAV that sits at that location that's just covering our western flank, just a static position. So changing the guard kind of thing. And now one of the tracks is driving back from the 5.5 easting, presumably to go get chow and chill out, right? And in front of OP Falcons in our dead space, they hit an IED. Boom. Blows the track up, right? A lot of casualties, right? Everyone lived, right? But a ton of casualties. And we were there. We let them down. We didn't catch the guys that put the IED in. We killed the guy that was close, but then they came back a few days later and they figured out where we could see and where we couldn't. They put an IED in. My platoon, my team failed. And so we were pissed. So we went down there, do a post-blast analysis, figure the whole thing out. Sorry. What happens after that is then that track hits the IED to help with the CASEVAC, the casualty evacuation that's happening there. The track from the 5.5 easting leaves his post to come help triage this casualty. They're gone for 45 minutes. He drives back to the 5.5 easting, hits an IED. Their team was so fast, they knew that we left a gap, but that taught me something. So what we did was, one, we were pissed. We kind of did some self-reflection. And then we thought about how we would do it. And so our team came together. We had Jimmy Proudman, Gabe White, Tony Scardino. And
Tony Scardino. That's a good name.
Hey, Tony
you guys
Scardino.
Must have been tight. I love it.
Except for the fact that his family was from Naples and my family was from Puglia.
That's great.
So
okay.
Anthony Scardino and Amatangelo Pasciuti. Yeah. Love me some Tony.
Great.
And it was great. So we figured out, okay, we got to do something, right? We need to go hunting. We need to figure out how to handle this problem because we got an IED problem in this area. Also, we have a sniper problem. So we devised a mission that was a trap. And so what we wanted to do, and the trap was this, and I remember explaining it to the battalion commander. I explained it to the company commander first, and he was like, yes. Explained it to the battalion commander, and he was like, no, right. So, and the company commander, so we didn't have we wanted to run a battalion mission to do this. So what we ended up doing anyways was we allowed this opportunity to present itself where 2 sniper teams, Banshee 2, Jimmy Proudman at the helm, Banshee 4, me at the helm. What we did was we moved into position on the 5.5 easting. And what we're going to do is move in at night, gain a surreptitious entry into 2 buildings. And so Jimmy was going to be to the west And Banshee 2's team was going to cover a kilometer to the west, a kilometer to the east, well, by gunfire, 2 kilometers to the west by observation, 2 kilometers to the east by observation. And then I was to the east, and we had this kind of W set up, covering Route Michigan, all the way into Ramadi, all the way kind of moving down this thing. And then what we were going to do is at 07 that morning, a track that at the 5-5 Easting was going to leave, and leave like they had somewhere to go. And so we get into position at 07 in the morning. The track under Red 1, who I was talking to, I think it was at the time, understands the mission, and they diddy mow. They take off. The trap is set. So the idea is we didn't want to use Marines as bait. I'm never going to use another Marine as bait, because what happens to the worm on the hook, right? It gets eaten. So we use the absence of Marines as bait. We wanted an IED in place. We wanted a sniper. We wanted them to think that they had freedom of movement in this region. And so at 07 in the morning, the trap was set.
Just a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll get right back to this combat story. Today's podcast is sponsored by Nutrisense. That was the sound of the Nutrisense biosensor that I've been wearing. Nutrisense is a really helpful tool that teaches me about the food and drink choices that affect my body and how to better manage stress, sleep, think about exercise, and more. I've tried other glucose monitors in the past, and they just did not compare to the Nutrisense system. For starters, the Nutrisense app is the key that I've been looking for, because it gives me a clear view of what my glucose levels are in real time, tracks my steps, I can enter my daily meals and calories and more. I used this during my episode with Jay, in fact, and could see that the coffee I drank at the beginning of the show had little effect on my glucose, which is great, but the beer I had, a lager, later on, increased my glucose, but not in a drastic way. Still, this is the kind of detail I've been looking for. To start decoding your body's messages and pave the way for a healthier life, visit Nutrisense.com/combat and get $30 off your first month and 1 month of board certified nutritionist support. When they ask you how you learned about Nutrisense, make sure to tell them it was the Combat Story podcast. That's Nutrisense.com/combat for $30 off your first month and 1 month of board certified nutritionist support. And now, back to this combat story. The assumption here, AJ, is obviously track leaves, somebody in places an ID, but it sounds like you're also accounting for the possibility that a sniper might move in that dead space.
Correct.
Okay.
So they have this, now there's this open zone that they have freedom of movement, and they can go, who knows,
whatever they want
to do.
Okay.
This is how you're supposed to employ snipers.
Yeah.
You ask a sniper to employ a sniper, not an infantry commander to employ a sniper, because normally what they would want me to do is an overt position. So snipers can be used to fill gaps in enemy lines, but the way that we fill the gaps is by allowing the gap to exist, and then to have the presumption of existing, and then we fill the gap. It's an old tactic that we continued to use. And so the trap was set at 7 in the morning. And here's how the story that enters into the third part. My very good friend, and AJ Barth is his name. He was a corpsman, and he was a sniper platoon corpsman, kind of like Doc Pell was in Fallujah. Doc Barth was for us in our deployment. So he was with my team at the time. So it's 7 o'clock in the morning. We've been in position for a few hours. The trap is now set, and I'm in the bedroom of this house, right? So we kind of get into this home. I'm on the second story. I have this window that I'm looking at. I have one gun that is facing to the north, and then one gun that is facing to the east. Brett Stidful is facing to the east, and he's covering down Route Michigan, 2 kilometers this way, 2 kilometers this way, and our web that we have. Team 2 this way, Team 4 this way. So I'm the gun that's facing to the north, and I'm looking at this little market, and I have this little window. I take like a nightstand from a bed, and I have this little window that I slide open, and I put my sniper rifle behind it, and I take the curtain, and I help create a hide site in there. I won't give away the tactics on how we do it, but I create a hide site in the building, and then we sit, and now I'm watching this direction. I've got the whole observation of the market, and I can hear the track where it was at 07 in the morning. I can hear it like, blah, 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 blah. You can hear it like rumbling, the diesel engine. And I'm covering this way, right? And so AJ comes up, Barth, the corpsman, right, comes up, and he's like, hey, dude. He's like, hey, AJ, AJ, right? And he's like, hey, dude, you've been up for a while? Because he's the team mom. He always, like the Capri Suns, right? Like he's always taking care of us, right? And he was a good team mom. And he would get mad when we wouldn't listen to him. So we never wanted to anger mom. Yeah. So he was like, hey, AJ, why don't you go down for a little bit? And then I'll take the watch. Totally normal, right? So what we did at the time, we learned later on that this would have been better to do at longer durations, but we would do hour on, hour off was generally the rotation. Later on, we learned through, understanding human anatomy and kind of how we work is that it's not restorative, right? So you're just constantly tired. When I was a recon team leader, we would do longer amounts of sleep because of that, because I wanted restorative sleep so we could stay out for longer durations. So it's 7 o'clock in the morning. Now the time for this story very much matters. So at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm supposed to go down for an hour and the bed is literally right behind the gun. So I just like come off the gun and I go lay in this like Iraqi people's like bed, right? And AJ's now on the gun. He's sitting on the corner of we have a chair moved over and he's sitting there. And so what happens is at 9 a.m., AJ wakes me up and he goes, hey, dude, like, hey, I was like, oh, what's up? Like, thank you. We're quiet, obviously, right? We're not like, hey, dude, you're up, dude, right? We're quiet, obviously. And he's like, hey, dude, you're up. And I was like, oh, thanks. He's like, I stayed on an extra hour because I wasn't tired, which is normal. Like if you're just cruise, let the guy sleep, right? Especially the team leader, which is great. So he let me sleep. But AJ and I were doing hour on, hour off, hour on, hour off. That was like the rotation. So technically he should have had from 7 to 8. I should have had from 8 to 9. He should have had from 9 to 10. So I get on the gun at 9. It's now his hour off, right? And what he says to me, you can probably bleep this out, right? But he says to me, I got to go take a shit. Don't kill anybody while I'm gone. So he goes downstairs. We see
where this is going.
Yeah. So he goes downstairs to go do his business, right? And he's taking his hour off. It's also summer. This is June in Iraq, right? So once you get past the hour of like 8 a.m., there's no sleeping. You're just existing, right? So like he's just going to lay his own sweat. So he's just up, right? So he's not going to use his hour to sleep. He's going to use his hour to take care of whatever, rest and refit, whatever he needs to do. So he's like, again, famous last words, right? So he says that. And then I'm cool. I'm on the gun. I throw in a dip because I'm like just waking up, and we called it formaldehyde. So it was Copenhagen, but it was like the overseas version. So it's not like good Copenhagen. So I'm throwing in this Copenhagen because I'm like looking on the gun, right? I went very far away from being the city boy, right? I felt like right into it, right? So I'm on the gun and I'm cruising, right? And all of a sudden I hear a track like rolling down the road, right? And no big deal, whatever, kind of cool. I see a car pull in, right? Normal market kind of happening, nothing really going on. Well, I see a track pull in and then I'm sitting there bored, like out of my mind. Like it's like 9:15. I'm like just starting. I'm kind of looking. What we're supposed to do as snipers, and this is what I was doing, it's called a 50-meter overlapping strip search. So sorry if you're being so detailed.
Man, this is great.
In the Western world, when we read English or in Western languages, we read from left to right. And so when you're looking to observe, I may be mansplaining this to you, knowing your background.
Do it.
When you're looking to do observation and you are from a Western culture who reads left to right, you want to observe from right to left. Because when we're reading from left to right, our brain fills in the cracks. So I could write a sentence that says, the cat jumps over the log, but I can remove consonants or remove vowels. But as long as it looks similar, your brain will fill in the gaps. Well, you don't want that to happen when you're doing detailed observation. So you go from right to left.
You want to see the gaps.
Correct. Yeah. And so you're going against what your brain's trained to. So what you do is you take 50 meters of land, of real estate that you're looking at, 50, like within one, scope is you. And then you're like a typewriter. Or you play like the alphabet game. I'm going to find an apple. I'm going to find a banana. I'm going to whatever it is. You're just bored and you're just like, mind you, this is like month 6 of my deployment. I've done this enough where you're like, nobody knows that like, this is the thing that's going to change your life, right? Like happening in 5 minutes. Like you don't know that, right? So I'm cruising. I got my chew in, right? Which was a wildly terrible mistake, knowing this thing, right? So then the track comes down, and they park in front of the thing, and I can hear their engine rumbling, and I was like, "Hey, Red 1, this is Banshee 4. They're not supposed to be here right now." And I'm like, "Hey guys, just so you know, we're running a mission right now. I need you guys to get out of here as soon as possible." Over the net. Kyle Burton gets up on the net, right? "Hey, what's up, man? Sorry, dude." Like we know each other. Kyle Burton is India Company. I was India Company. Yeah. This is our 3rd deployment together, right? In 3 years. Like we know each other pretty well. "What's up, dude? Hey man, we're letting our engine cool down. We're going to be here for a minute. We'll get out of here. We know your thing, right?" "All right, sounds good, man. No worries." And so they're just let her engine idle, do whatever it is, routine patrol kind of thing, because they got a squad of grunts in the back and they're just doing their thing. And so then what happens is I am scrolling across, and then all of a sudden I catch a glare. A ray of sunlight hits a lens and it glares back at me and it kind of sheens, and I look at it. At that time, we had very new scopes. It was called the Schmidt and Bender, and it was a variable power optic. And so I have it zoomed out so I can see a larger area. The glare hits, and then I zoom in, right? And then all of a sudden I look at the glare, and it is the corner of a Sony Handycam. And the Sony Handycam has the lens thing here, the little body, and then the flip out screen like this. And I see that. And where it's sitting is in a vehicle that's it's almost in line. Well, it's kind of like this, right? Kind of almost kind of like at a 45-degree angle. And it's in a little gray sedan. And in the sedan, so there's the rear window, and then there's the side passenger door window, rear passenger door window, and then there's like that triangle window in between. Yep. It's sitting on the back ledge in that window, and the rest of the car is tinted to high heaven with the exception of that window. Well, that to us is a disturbance in the baseline. There's a natural baseline, obviously a camera. And so I come over the net and I go, red one, button up, you're about to get hit. What I think, ID in place, sir. Holy crap, they got one through on us. These guys are about to get blown up. I failed. They're going to die. This is my fault, right? Wow. And so I cannot see them. I can only hear them. And they're like, what? And so Kyle Burton, who retired as a sergeant major and is a close friend of mine, he turns to his squad and goes, get down, we're about to get hit. Because this is hindsight, right? And so they button up and they're bracing because they think they're about to get hit. They don't know what's going on. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, and I start coming over the radio. Now this is company TAC. So Captain Len Coleman from Chicago, right? Is phenomenal dude, is listening on company TAC because they have like a squawk box at the COC, right? And pipes up, right? Obviously, because he hears the panic in my voice, right? It's not like the movies were like, Red one, this is Cubby leader, right? This is not how it works. I'm like, wow, right? And then obviously it's the summer in Iraq and I have a big old chewing and it's like, and then I'm nervous and goes, and everything dries up and I got like dip everywhere, right? So as this thing's happening on, I want to be able to I don't want to give up my position. I'm a sniper. I want to use combined arms first. So I hear rotors in the distance at Al Taqaddum. They launched from Al for TQ is what we called it. And so rotors are in the distance. So I have a Leica vector or so I can spin and pull a pretty good, like mensurated 10-digit grid, like pretty accurate. So I'm calling for fire on this thing. I'm like, let's get it, right? Let's get a Cobra in here, send a tow missile in, right? Let's just end this thing with a fireball, right? And I get to stay in position, right? So I'm calling this Cobra in. Everything's kind of like, I'm calling for fire. From the COC, denied. Oh, okay. Well, what happens is on the map, 400 meters north of this position is a mosque. Well, we have what's called an NFA, a no fire area, around 500 meters around each mosque. So now we're trying to close that. If I know it's a target, I can close that to 250 so I can send something in. Negative. Can't get rotor in there. Okay, this, India company, this is Banshee 4, adjust fire grid, right? I'm trying to call a grid mission. Artie is at TQ. I'll put a round on an 8-digit grid right now, right? Negative, right? Can't do it. Still within the NFA. 60 millimeter mortars at OP Falcons, where we left from. Call adjust fire polar, right? I'm giving you everything. And Coleman is freaking out because he keeps getting denied, because coming down the road is the battalion commander down the main. He's doing one of his battlefield tours coming down the road. And he is not a bad guy by any means, right? But he's coming down the road and he wants the situation to stay as static as possible so that he's a commander. He wants to command, right? I don't know what he's thinking, right? But I know that we keep getting denied, right? Because of the NFA around it, right? And the boys are just trying to eat. Coleman trying to protect his company, right? Battalion commander is a battalion commander. He's trying to make sure the battlefield is secure. He's like, not by no fault of his own, right? Wants to make sure that we're not blowing up a mosque, right? You know, like I completely understand that. And then all of a sudden, I see a hand. I didn't know anyone was in the vehicle, right? I saw the corner of something. So I saw the camera, and then I saw kind of a corner of something. Now I know what it is, right? But I saw the corner of something that I couldn't really identify. It had like a rubber backing on it, and it had like almost like a camouflage thing. I had an inclination, but I couldn't. Snipers have been very well trained to use the word appears to be, because I cannot tell you for sure what it is. Yeah. I don't want to incur that risk. So I said what appears to be a camera, and I don't know what it is in the other thing, right? So like, I don't know. So I see a hand, and now I've confirmed, holy crap, there's a person in this vehicle. I see a hand come forward, and he's messing with the camera. And I'm like, oh God, like it's happening, right? So I come over the net, and I'm like, Red One, I think I was talking with Diesel. Diesel was India Company Commander's call sign, Diesel 6. Diesel 6, we're talking back and forth. A hand is coming out, right? And he goes, Pasciuti, take the shot, right? Breaking protocol, because in the military, we don't say names. And he goes, Pasciuti, take the shot. And then I'm like panicking, right? Because I'm like on the gun, right? And I'm like, well, but I can't guarantee where my shot goes, right? Because
you're in the NFA.
Because I'm in the NFA. Well, also, I'm now shooting through a medium, right? And so when
the medium being
a glass. Yeah. So when I shoot through the glass, I have no control of what happens to the bullet after that, because it shoots something and it affects the trajectory. There's civilians by, right? And I've got to make a shot right now. So what I'm like, okay, so I'm not like denying this thing. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. What I say is, okay, I'm going to shoot one round to punch a hole in the glass, and then I'm going to put two more right behind it. Roger, take the shot. And that's what I do. And now like they can hear me. I'm in the room by myself initially. And now they're hearing me over the radio, and my team is starting to move in. Sans AJ Barth, right, is starting to hear
busy
because he's busy, right? Hearing everything going on, and they're behind me right as I pull the first trigger. Boom! I break the glass, and then I send two rounds within what's called a minute of angle. So basically I'm just putting one on top of the other. I put 3 rounds through the glass, and then all hell breaks loose. We have a family in the home, in one of the rooms. Now what we do is we go into the home, and it's like, hey, sorry, we're here. Obviously they don't like it. We put them into a room. We give them food and water, right? Like, you're not coming out. Sorry. Yeah. Right. This is the way that it works. I'm not happy with it either. Right. But so they're freaking out. Their neighbors are freaking out because they think that whatever we're doing, right? There's screaming, there's chaos everywhere. So what happened was there were 3 rounds reported from an M40 series sniper rifle. And so now what happens is something that I didn't catch earlier on was this car was sitting there just outside of my view or kind of quasi in my view, is a chai shop. And there is a dude drinking chai who hears 3 rounds, 3 reports from an M40 series sniper rifle, who finishes his tea, chaos is ensuing. The normal scene is happening. He stands up from his table and walks over to the car. So I get off the gun and I'm on my knee because I think the situation is over, right? A guy by the name of Sergeant Kevin Homestead, who wasn't a sniper, but was a close friend of mine, and I don't have my spotter with me. Kevin Homestead is an avid hunter. And he's telling me the difference between a mule deer and a white-tailed deer and whatever, like the better meat. Yeah, I don't know any of this stuff, right? I've never hunted anything that didn't walk on 2 legs, right?
It's crazy.
And so he's on, Kevin, get on the gun, right? Because I'm now handling this like situation, because now the battalion commander is like cruising down, right? Oh my God, there's shots fired, chaos is ensuing, what's going on? Everybody wants to know what's happening. And so Kevin's on the gun and he goes, AJ, and I look up and I see this guy walking towards the car, and I say, Kevin, as soon as he touches that car, he becomes a combatant. So wait till the very last moment. The shot is 174 meters away. This is not hard for a sniper, especially when we're trained to shoot 1,000, and I can miss it 800 apparently, right? So the person walks up to the car. He opens now what's the front passenger door, and he opens the passenger door, looks inside, and then boom, Kevin shoots, hits him in the side. The guy falls to his knees. And then he turns and faces towards us. And then Kevin shoots him again, hits him in the center of the chest, right? And then the guy crawls across gets into the car and crawls across the center console and then is sitting. And again, like, it's hard for me to see. I can't control the situation anymore. So Kevin gets off the gun. I get back on the gun. Kevin is now controlling. Doc Barth is running up the stairs with a wag bag, right? And he's like, what's going on? And we're like filling him up to what's going on. And he's fucking pissed. He's never going to forgive me for this. Sorry, AJ. So now I'm on the gun and this person is still alive, right? I can see him moving, but I can't control what he's doing. And I can't see, does he have a gun? Does he have a grenade? So now I'm still talking to Sergeant Burton, right? And Sergeant Burton is now getting his track to maneuver across this wadi to go to where this vehicle is at, to be able to figure out what's going on. So he's got to cross a wadi and he's got to get there. So and now I'm thinking this guy's going to have the drop on Burton.
Yeah.
So, and I can't see him. I can see the back of the driver's seat, but he's sitting and his feet are like laid across the center console. All I can see are this person's legs. And so the only thing that I can think to do to immobilize the person is I shoot him in the knees, right? To make sure that he cannot run, he cannot do anything. And again, everybody talks about rules of war, right? As black and white. None of this stuff is black and white. No. I'm trying to prevent Sergeant Burton, who I now know that there was some bad stuff going on. And now a spotter walks up to a vehicle and we've put now 4 bullets into this guy and he's still alive, right? And so I've got to try to make him as mobile as possible so that my guys don't get killed when they go up there. So what happens is Sergeant Burton's guys get there, they open up the track, they flood out, right? They look in the front, and what apparently had happened was the gentleman in the front of the vehicle had eventually succumbed to his wounds. Effectively, he drowned, right? 2 long shots. It just took a matter of time. I didn't know that when it was happening, right? So he had succumbed to his wounds, and I'm explaining as Burton's listening. I said, "Okay, I'm on your shoulders. I'm watching your back." Again, we don't know what. There was a hand in this. I know that there was something moving in the back of the vehicle. I don't know what's going on anymore. I know now that there's a dude in the front of the vehicle. This is all a big question mark to us. And so I'm like, "Hey, guy," he's like, "Okay, cool, he's dead," right? And now we're like, "Oh, we'll open up the back door." And they open the back door, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, he's gone, right? You got him, right?" So my shots when they first came in had killed the sniper, right? But I didn't know for sure it was a sniper at the time. And so what I tell him is now Burton is standing in between me, which is not good for him to do. He's standing in between me and the car. So I'm like trying to work with him, but again, a lot of chaos. And I said, "Listen, there's a person in the back." He's like, "Yeah, he's dead." Okay, cool. I'm not like, so we're like moving on, right? I said, "There's a Sony Handycam or some sort of video camera in the back left window." And he goes, "Yeah." And he grabs it and he shakes it in the air for me because I'm like less than 200 meters away. And he shakes it in the air for me. And I said, "Roger." And he goes, "There's something else in here." And then he looks down and he goes, "It looks like a rifle." And I went, "What?" And so all of a sudden it dawns on me. Holy shit, that thing that I couldn't see was a rifle. So then he pulls it out. And we're not thinking about anything other than trying to end the situation. He pulls the rifle out and then he moves it. Again, his back is to me and he moves it across his body and puts it in the vehicle. He says, "Yeah, it looks American." And I said, "Wait a second, bring the rifle back out." And he holds it in the air for me and I can see it in the air. And I went, "Oh my God." And then I said, "Can you read me the first 4 digits of the serial number?" So all Marine sniper rifles start with they're all obviously ineffective. The model that I was using was Echo 676, right? Was the M40A5. That was an M40A1. So I think it was Echo November or something like that, or Echo 6 November something. But it had a series of Echo and 6s inside of it, which denominated that it was in fact a Marine sniper rifle. So we knew it up. And he goes, and I went, "Holy shit." And he goes, "That's a Marine's rifle." And I said, "That's 2-4's rifle." And that moment we knew that it was 2-4 sniper rifle. So what we did was now all hell is breaking loose. Now there's like a riot outside. So people are thinking that we like executed the family and stuff, and we're like getting out. Okay, now breaking down. Yeah. I've shot, so we're compromised. We got to move. So now we're cruising. We get out of the house. Now we're all fitting into Kyle's track, right? There's always room for one more, right? And so we get in the track, and they hand me the rifle, right? And they give me the thing, and So Marine snipers have this thing called a hog's tooth, right? And it is so remember, pigs versus hogs, or pigs and hogs. And so a hog is considered a hunter of gunmen. And we took this from British snipers in World War I. What British snipers used to do is we live by a code. It's called the way of the gun. You live by the gun, you die by the gun. That's just the life that we live. And so a hog's tooth, original British snipers, what they used to do is when they would kill an enemy combatant or an enemy sniper, they would take the last round chambered out of that gun because it was the bullet that was effectively meant for them. And if you wore the bullet around your neck, you could never die. Yeah. And so when a Marine sniper graduates, what we do is we give them a 7.62 sniper round, and we drill a hole in it, we put it on a necklace, and we almost like crown these guys with it, or in gals, and we put it around their neck, and that is the round that's meant to take their life. And they wear it around their neck for the rest of their lives, or when they're in combat, whatever it is, right? And so the truest definition of a hog's tooth is taking a bullet out of an enemy sniper's last round. And so what I did was I took the bullet out of the last round chambered. And what we did was we decided to eventually put that on a plaque, because the idea was it wasn't mine, never was mine, right? Never will be mine. The idea was that it was 2 4s, and then it was 3 5s. And we are connected by that one single thing. We were connected forever by that rifle. So we took that thing out, right? And we kept the bullet, and I was able to put it on a plaque, and we gave it to them. And since then we don't know what's happened with it. But then we go back, and then we do a post-op analysis. And Juba was in fact filming Kyle Burton, who was in the TC hatch, in the troop commander hatch, in the track. Kyle was his next target. And so he pulled into, the sniper had a trap set up as well. And he pulled into the trap. And in that video, you can see my window that I shot from. You can't see me, but you can see my window. We were looking at each other, and Kyle pulled into the middle, and he made a mistake first.
Dude.
The only bad part about this story is when I saw his hand, he was turning his camera off, because I told Red1 to button up when I saw the camera. So in the video, you see Kyle look left, look right, and slam the hatch closed. So when his shot went away, he was turning off his camera. The poetic justice would have been to have our very own video of the report from my rifle coming through. You could see my hide sight. Yeah. You couldn't see us, obviously, but you saw our window.
Man.
We were staring at each other for hours, and he flinched first.
And it was just a movement of, it was the glint, whatever, yeah, off of a...
He was turning his camera on.
I will say, I mean, obviously I've never been in an experience like that, but as a pilot, you know, I've been in an overwatch position, moving around, looking at what feels like a gigantic area, trying to find the needle. Mm-hmm. You know, it's never been fixed the way you described, but the attention to like staying on a target and staying on an area and finding something unique and drilling in is not easy. Mm-hmm. Like, we had a guy that I flew with all the time. He could find almost anything. Mm-hmm. And we'd look at the same terrain and I would never see it. And he'd be like, nope, this guy's right here. I guess what I'm getting at is the way you describe it. It's like, well, I was kind of lucky that I saw this, but there's a little bit of, you know, you weren't dozing off. You were going through the pattern and using these techniques, and this thing happened that you caught and maybe somebody else doesn't.
Life's just patterns, right? That's why I like math so much, because I think it provides, you know, like a Fibonacci sequence kind of thing. It just provides patterns for us. And if you pay attention to the pattern, you can find a lot of answers in it. And so we got really lucky. And we were able to take a life, 2 lives. And from that, we saved a lot. And Kyle and I still remain friends to this day.
That's amazing.
Yep. We saw each other last in Texas a couple of months ago. And so it's kind of cool. And so unfortunately after that, the rifle was lost. We got it back. We shipped it back to the United States. And then from there, I'm a sergeant, right? I don't get control over what happens to things like that. It's not like the old days, right? So it was lost for a long time. And so we had heard that I took my mom to see it once, because it was at 5th Marines. It was at the regimental headquarters. So I took my mom there on a weekend, right? And I'm walking through the hallway, and it's like, it was in the stairwell. And I was walking up, and it showed the rifle, and I was explaining to my mom and this and that. And she was like, so my mom's been the constant through my career, right? Like, so my family, my mom, my stepdad, my stepmom, all of it, they were all constants through it, right? So I liked sharing these things. And again, it's weird for people to understand, like, I'm so proud of my son, right? Like he's, some people have said some really mean stuff to my mom before. There was a woman who came up to her, and it was like a weird kind of brag. Sorry to tangent.
No, yeah.
But she was like, isn't it crazy what, it's like messed my mom up for a while. She's like, isn't it crazy what our sons grew up to be? Mine's in his 4th year at UCLA, and yours grew up to be a killer, right? And it's like, whoa, that was weird.
Wow.
So yeah, stuff like that. And so my mom and I were in this hallway, and I'm kind of explaining stuff to her, and some jerk Marine comes down the stairs, and he's like, can I help you? Right. And he's like, you need to get out of here, and you're like, yeah. And he didn't have any idea, because I've never claimed credit for it. He didn't have any idea that I was the person that got the rifle there, right, and stuff like that. And my mom was livid. She's like, "Why don't you tell him?" I was like, "Nah, it ain't about it. Like, it's just not about that." So it's never been about us. It's never been about me. It's always been about us. So when I tell the story, I tell it in 3 parts, because Corporal Tommy Parker, right, when he gave his life, right, when him and his team were killed for that started the story. And it moved through Iraq, and it was nearly 2 years to the day. Mm-hmm. And it was from a 5th Marines unit, lost by a 5th Marines unit, nearly 2 years to the day, recovered back by a 5th Marines unit, Marine sniper to Marine sniper. And so now the Marine Corps Museum has it. We found it. The Marine Corps Museum has it, and they're putting it on display in the OEF wing. And it should be November 10th, 2025 is when that wing should open up.
Way.
Yeah.
That's pretty special.
And very much to my pleasure, there will be no mention of my name.
Dude, I will say, for those who are interested, you can see AJ's well wishes on Mother's Day to his mom on DVids, which has you in uniform. I think maybe you were in Japan.
Oh, really?
Possibly Hawaii. Oh. Giving this, hey mom.
I remember I was in Japan.
Yeah, it's great, man. It's like this guy cares about his mom.
Oh, right, absolutely. Absolutely. She'd wring my neck if I didn't. 4'11". I'm scared of hell.
No. Oh man. All right. I want to talk about 2 more things, and then I'll let you go, man. This is so good. I want to talk. I got to get the name right. Matthew Ingham. If we talk about him, and then we'll talk about faith, and then we'll be done. Okay. If that's all right.
Yeah. Okay.
I know, it should be easy.
Yeah,
we'll
sure.
In and out of this. So Matthew Ingham.
Yeah. My closest friend and my biggest nemesis.
So this is the story we heard at this gala. Obviously, this guy has a pretty significant role to play in your life, and a tragic ending. Where do you guys meet? Let's start there, I guess.
Matt and I met in 2008. I was a sniper instructor at Camp Pendleton, and he was a what's called high-risk personnel instructor in Quantico, Virginia. He was an East Coast sniper, and I was a West Coast sniper, right? So naturally, we hated each other. Because there is a very big coast.
And sorry, this Juba event had already happened.
Correct.
And does he know this?
No, I don't.
No, interesting.
Few, wow. Some people know about it, mainly. So I will be pretty candid with you. Our generation of Marines was really, really bad to each other. So the Marine Corps, and I plan to fix this one day, right? Like mark my words, I plan to fix this and make this right. The Marine Corps has a really good culture in a lot of ways, but what we've turned it into is this culture is that he was just doing his job, right? So when Greg Rund was kicking down that door and going into that house where there was known enemy on the other side, and he made a decision to go in and then lost his life because of it, that wasn't brave. He was just doing his job, right? He doesn't need a medal. That was just doing his job, right? It's a piece of tin and a piece of cloth, but it means more to that. It means more to us than that. And so the Marine Corps is really, really bad about the way that we give out awards. And so I was never formally recognized for that, which is fine. That's just the way that it goes. There's a team.
Surprising. Yeah.
Well,
but it's not with the Marine Corps. It is hard to get an award there.
Very much so.
Yeah.
What they did with the award was, so effectively, like, I guess technically I was awarded. I was approved for a medal and everything was ready to go through for what's called a Navy Commendation Medal. So it's like a relatively junior medal, right? And everything was approved because I was a team leader in Iraq. And I had known that I was approved for that because all the team leaders had gotten those awards. And then what happened was I had killed Juba so close to our redeployment back home that instead of submitting for an impact award, what they did was they deleted the last sentence and added the last sentence to cover the last incident of Juba. And so when I was awarded the Navy Commendation Medal, it was technically for that.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the commanders had a hand in that. And I think that's fine for me, right? That's sure. But what I recognize is we created a culture of that.
Yeah.
If that happens to me on that big of an incident, how many other Marines?
So many. Yeah.
And then the more you stay in, the worse it gets. And the more you understand that awards in the Marine Corps are tied to rank. Even when I left the Marine Corps, it was tied to rank. And so I remember those things and I will change those things one day because I think that telling people that they matter is the most important thing that we can do in this life. Remember trajectory and people that have helped me along the way. All those people did was they saw me. They made me feel seen.
Yeah.
And so when we don't do that for our Marines, we're telling them that they're not important. It's a piece of tin
costs nothing.
And cloth. Yeah. It costs nothing but time to write the award and the whip of a pen. When I left the Marine Corps, my award was reduced. It was approved by every single person through the 1-star command. And 3 days before I retired, it was reduced by the 3-star general. And what he said was, and he didn't say it to me himself, he said it through my commander, who was a close friend of mine, that to preserve the sanctity of the award, we're only awarding that to colonels and above.
Whoa.
And I was told that the day before I retired.
Wow.
Yeah. And my boss had to sit me down and tell me that with like near tears in his eyes.
Yeah.
So like, I'm burned by that. I don't hate the Marine Corps. I ain't happy with it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You know, but there was nothing better than a moment like that to be able to be like, no, I'm good here.
Yeah, I made the right choice.
I made the right choice. Yeah, thank you for making my choice.
So clearly, Matt would not have known of this because you're not going to talk about it and nobody bestowed anything on you.
Yeah, and again, we have met people in our history that are very proud to talk about their accolades, and that is, I have a very good friend who's a Navy SEAL, and I give him shit all the time for it. And I was like, that's a SEAL thing, dude. Let them do all that. So, but to his credit, because of that, because the SEALs are very good at branding, when I have to describe what it is I do, I have to say, well, do you know what a Navy SEAL is? And everyone goes, yeah. Well, I'm like that, but I'm the Marine version. And they're like, oh, but you're not a SEAL. No, I'm not a SEAL.
Sorry.
I have to use, so again, regardless of my feelings, the branding is good. So, so Matt and I, we don't know that, and I'm not going to like tell anybody. I don't care, right? It doesn't matter. And again, that was in the past, right? So we're looking towards the future. Well, Matt and I decide that we want to be able to go to basic reconnaissance course. We want to become recon Marines. And dude, Matt was so good. He was faster. He could do more pull-ups than me. Like every single way you can imagine, he was better than me. And that just pissed me right off, right? Because I may have had a little ego as a sergeant.
Fair enough.
I may have. After 3 tours through Iraq in 4 years and being a sniper instructor, I may have been a little self-assured, is the way that I'd put it.
Okay.
So we meet in BRC and we're like instant enemies, right? Because we're like sizing each other up, right? It's not terrible, right? We knew each other from a course before, but we become pretty good friends because we're not in the same team or anything like that. So we're like helping one another, co-opetition, right? I still got my eye on that guy, right? But I'm not directly competing against him. So since I was on the West Coast, the best coast, and he was from the East Coast, he had to stay in the barracks. Well, I lived out in town. And so what I did was I was like, hey, dude, you just want to like sleep on my couch or whatever? And so that just became our thing. He slept on my couch every single night. And we would drive home together, and I was the class leader going through it. So I was responsible for everything and he was the A/, which he didn't like. So, but we were responsible for we had a lot of young guys in that class too, like brand new, young Marines. And so it was a lot of like keeping the young guys kind of coalesced, making sure they're going the right. So we were like mom and dad, like little terror, like thunder and lightning. Right. I had this thing in BRC that Matt used to make fun of me for was, so I don't drink, right? And I was in my first year of sobriety at the time. So I was like relatively new. So I had to create new pathways. And so based on how bad my day was in BRC, I would come home and I would rip open a package of Oreos and I would sit there with Oreos and milk and I would just dip my Oreo into my milk. And so also AJ Barth, the corpsman, was my roommate. So we lived in this little condo together. Matt was sleeping on our couch, and then AJ would just be like cooking dinner or whatever. And I would come home and I would grab a thing of milk. 8 o'clock at night, I'd grab a thing of milk and Oreos, and I'd just plop on the couch, right? And he was like, "That bad?" And I'm like, right, and I'm up at 4, right, the next day to go in. So that was how Matt and I kind of bonded, right? Through that, we'd sit in a jacuzzi and study because we were like stretching, whatever. It was just great. I fell in love with how hard that man worked, and he made me work all the much harder. And so we competed, furiously through BRC. I graduated BRC, the honor man. I beat him by like 0.05%. And I never let him forget it. Yep. Right. So I called him number 2. And he always had, so Matt had this thing where he had like an extra tooth there. His canine came in like right here. And so when he would get mad, his lip would get caught on his little canine. And he would look at me and I was like, don't you growl at me. Right? Like, number 2, and he always had this like RBF. Like he always looked like he was mad, and he just wasn't. He was a super nice guy, but he always looked like super serious. He looked like a sniper. Like I'm over here like this high school thespian, like Buddy the Elf, right? And this guy's like a stone cold sniper, right? Well, anyways, so we go to Okinawa, Japan. We get sent to 3rd Recon Battalion together. And we go to 3rd Platoon, and we're in the same platoon together. And we are competing because now he is a staff sergeant or an E6, and I'm a staff sergeant in E6, and we're both team leaders, but we don't call each other team leader names, right? So we have a very new platoon. A lot of the students from the course came with us. And so we're preparing. Like now Obama is in office and the surge in Afghanistan is starting to percolate, right? We're trying to transition from Iraq, and we need to put the Taliban down. So even though the President Obama made a whole bunch of promises to be able to, lower the cost of the war, he had to be able to surge, or was convinced to surge in Afghanistan. So we were part of that. So we go through like a year-long workup and we get nasty. Like our recon team is good. And we were very focused on reconnaissance and surveillance, right? So there's recon Marines cover a large swath of stuff. They cover, direct action. They cover visit board search and seizure. They cover a number of things. And then they also cover like deep reconnaissance, right? The ghillie suit type, sniper type stuff, but a little further. So our teams focus on that. Matt's a sniper. I'm a sniper. That's our bread and butter. Getting out in the woods, right? Just living and hunting the enemy. And so our platoon really focuses on that. We get really, really good. We train all over the world, Korea. We train in Japan a whole bunch, United States. Well, here it comes is we're like a month from deployment. And our platoon commander, Captain Kevin Kincaid, who's a Naval Academy guy, will from the area, and we'll forgive him for being a Naval Academy guy, right? And so we have an Army Navy game coming up here soon. Yeah. So we're cruising through that, right? And then I've got my platoon sergeant, Efrain Martinez, right? And they come up to us like, Matt, AJ, we got to decide. Team 1, team 2. Who wants it? I was like, we do. And he's like, no, I do. I'm like, no, I do. And we're like fisticuffs, right? Matt could beat me up if he wanted to. I mean, a lot of people could beat me up. Yeah. So We want it, and we're like fervently trying to fight for it. This is like my team better. We did better on this raid. We're like yelling, right? You know, but I mean, his little tooth is coming out again, right? He's all mad, right? And so they look and they're like, listen, we can't decide. So they bring our assistant team leaders up. I got Joe Galuli, right? He brings his ATL up, and we got to decide. And so boss pulls out, the skipper pulls out a quarter, and he says, all right, we're going to flip a coin. And he says, heads, we're going to go to Matt, or sorry, heads, AJ is the team leader for team one, and Matt, Tails is the team leader for team one. And for us, team one is the prime spot. You're the go-to team. You're the alpha squad. Like you're the guys that get called in for all the dangerous stuff. And so we want it, and we both earned it. So they flip the coin, and so it flies. And I remember looking at it and like this little, I definitely have mesothelioma now from this like old bomb manufacturing facility in Hawthorne, Nevada. And we're watching this thing flitter through the air with like bat guano on the roof, right? And it's flittering through the air. And we were like holding each other back because we want to let it hit the ground, right? Like,
no interference,
no take backsies, interference, right? Lands on heads. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, no, 2 out of 3. And
no,
I'm like,
of course.
fuck you, 2 out of 3. Wow. And I like leave. And he's like, oh, no. He's like pissed. He wouldn't talk to me for like 2 days. Right? Yes. He was mad at me, right? So what's up, number 2? Right?
Man.
Right? Yeah. Woof. Oh man, he was mad. He was mad because his team was performing when we were in Hawthorne. My team was kind of screwing up a little bit. And so he was pissed. He felt he deserved it, and he probably did. And so then, a month later we deploy and go to Afghanistan. I get there early. I deployed on October 31st of 2009. So I get there early. I end up running a couple of missions with the SAS down in Southern Helmand province. Really good guys, really good missions down there. And I was on advanced party. And so they show up, main body shows up, and then we get in, and then we have different battle spaces of where they need recon platoons. And so our platoon gets sent to a place called Nowzad. And the Nowzad Valley is on the southern tip of the Hindu Kush Mountains. It's kind of like the northwestern region of Helmand. It's the winter. It is blisteringly cold. But it's not cold enough to where it's like in this weird place where it's like sleeting, but it's not snowing. But then it gets cold. Oh, it's worse. It was the worst as we go through this. So we go into Nowzad, and there's this area. It's this really, really long valley running north to south. Nowzad had been won by the Brits. The Brits had moved in, and they had fought with a lot of blood to keep that place. And the Taliban was fierce. So we come in. The very first day that we're there, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines checks in like the week before. So the week before that we get there, on the very first patrol, a Marine steps on an IED and like in the area, vaporized, boom, right? Then the react platoon comes out to help. They hit an IED. They had like 16 casualties in like a day on their very first patrol into Nowzad. This was the Wild West, right? And so we hear this, we come in, and they're excited that recon's coming here, because recon are like snipers in a lot of ways, where we get to help the infantry and be able to say, like, we can go and we have different rules as well, and different commanders. So we have different roles that we can play. And so we link up immediately with the sniper platoon. Some of those guys, I was their sniper instructor.
Oh, geez.
And so we meet with them, and then it's game on. Now we're hunting, right? So we got the sniper platoon, recon platoon. We're just hunting Taliban as much as we can. So we have the black mountains on the west and the white mountains on the east, and they're very different colors. It was an interesting topography. And so we start going to work, and we go up into these mountains, and we're living in the mountains for days at a time, generally 6 to 8 days at a time. And it's the winter, so it's like blisteringly cold, but we can't bring a lot of gear because I have to bring food and I have to bring water. So the only thing that I would bring with us, the thing that all of us brought to be able to sustain on, were Cliff Bars, because they're packed with nutrients and they're small. I will never eat another Cliff Bar for the rest of my life.
I can't imagine.
And it was the winter, so they're always frozen. And so I would sit there and have to like gnaw on this Cliff Bar. I can't tell you how many times I've read the story of how Cliff Bars was started. Like, maybe this one will be different. And you're like, my dad, Cliff, was an outdoor adventurist and wanted to I've read it a million times, man. I can almost, like the sniper definition that I was giving you earlier. I'm like, so Cliff good. Bar, like my dad, Cliff, like I know he made it in our kitchen, and then backcountry pioneer. Like, I know the whole thing. Cliff Bars, man. Sorry, Cliff Bars. I won't eat you again. And there was only one kind because we were out in the Wild West. The way that they delivered our mail was through airdrop. I'll never forget the day before Christmas, we're getting a mail drop. All of our Christmas packages are coming.
No.
The parachute didn't open.
I knew you were going to say that.
Dude, we're standing out there and the C-130 just rips by, right? And then we watch one open, we're like, all right, cool. And then we watch one, look, you see it fluttering? Fucking mail burns in, dude. It was Christmas Eve, dude. And we're like, oh, like, no.
Hope it wasn't electronic.
Oh my God.
Oh, man.
And it just like spreads all across this drop zone. And we're like, and we all just kind of turn around and like go back, like
as the Air Force guys head back to
go enjoy your ice cream. Christmas is canceled, It's like, dude, that was a wild deployment, right?
Yeah.
So we're working up there. We're up for 8 days at a time, right? And it's just miserable. And I'm like not moving. Like I'm sitting on some like crappy frozen rock, right? It was just miserable. But we become these like little billy goats, right? And we were just cruising through the mountains like little velociraptors, right? The Taliban hated us, right? Because we would call in airstrikes. We would see them from afar. I wasn't using a lot of my weaponry because I had very long distances. So we had very good observation equipment that ran on batteries, right? That would lose power in the cold. So I had to carry more batteries, which meant I carried more less food. So therefore enter cliff bars. It was just miserable cold through that process. And Matt and I would always alternate. I was out, he was out. I was out, he was out. And then we'd take a couple of days off, or we'd relay, whatever it was. And so we're hunting for a while. We're there for a little over a month. We're getting some pretty good exploits. The infantry is very happy with what we're doing. Matt goes out on a mission right before or in between Christmas and New Year's. Yeah, I think he spent New Year's out there, if I wasn't mistaken. And so Matt goes out and because I cooked him Christmas dinner. My last picture with him.
What'd you cook him?
So we had a 55-gallon drum that we cut in half, and we cleaned it out as best we could, and we turned it into a barbecue. And so he came back on Christmas night from a mission, and we made friends with the cook. So we have like a cook there. We let him like shoot all of our guns, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so we made friends. We're not stupid, right?
Yep.
And he gave us like the extra steak. So they have like certain meals. They always make us, kind of like really good meals. So Christmas meals. So he gave us extra steak and bacon and jalapenos.
Oh man.
I mean, it said the box said for prison and military use only. So like it was a little rubbery, right? So we're cruising through. So Matt comes back on Christmas Eve. My last picture with him is me cooking him bacon wrapped jalapenos and steak. So because we always, whenever a team was out, we'd cook a great dinner for him coming back in. And so that was the thing. Always come, doesn't matter what time of the day, they get a fresh meal when they come back in. We just loved one another, right? We hated one another, but we loved one another, right? And so he finds something when he's out on this mission, and he collects a lot of information, and he finds this place called he was hunting in a place called Bar Nowzad. And Bar Nowzad ended up being what we call an enemy rear area. It was defended in rings, right? But it wasn't super defended inside of it because it was kind of a black market area. It was where the Taliban would kind of come together and plan larger operations. It was because we were good observers, we could tell who the leaders were. And he was able to be like, this is high value stuff. So his information was turned into intelligence. And then as it matriculated through the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade at Camp Leatherneck, it came back down. We're going to raid this thing. Mm-hmm. We're going to send in a battalion air raid into this thing. About 1,000 Marines are going to come in. And so we kick on for this mission. Start planning this thing. We fly out to a different place to go get some planning and stuff like that. We brief these whole missions, and we kind of go and we set this thing up. And so we're going to be Bar Nowzad, Kanjaki Olea, Kanjaki Sofla, 3 little towns on a dot on a map that no one's ever going to care about. Yeah. But they mean the world to me. And so my mission, one of the missions was that we were going to go towards 2 mission sets were one. Bar Nowzad and to the southeast, about 7-ish kilometers. So the idea is there were both hotspots that we had found on separate missions. So I had seen this one before. Matt had found the Bar Nowzad. That was the tasty one, right? But we were going to raid the whole area. Heliborne assault. Come on in, right? And the idea was we're going to put recon teams in there 24 hours prior. 24 hours was not what we wanted. We wanted longer, but we kept getting compromised because there's no vegetation. Goat herders are all over the mountains up in Afghanistan. And so I can't tell you how many times I'd get into a position. I would hike for 12 hours through the mountains, and I'd get there and I'd wake up and some little kid with his dog and his goats. And you're like, son of a gun, right? You're like,
we could never get Pathfinders in to get ahead. They're constantly compromised.
Always. They're everywhere. And these kids, and like I saw one kid and I was like, and then what he does is he goes, Wah! And like runs down this valley. And I was like, this is Banshee. Actually, no, our call sign was Bear Shark because we wanted Bear Shark. Rare. We wanted to take the toughest animal from the land, the toughest animal from the water, put them together. So we came up.
Dang.
By the way, I did not condone the use of Bear Shark. That was Matt and Kevin Kincaid all day. Wow. I hated that name. But now I love it. So Bear Shark was in there. And yeah, this kid running down, Bear Shark's compromised, right? Some kids like wailing down this valley, right?
Can't blame him.
Yeah, right. I'm like, Candy, would you like a Cliff Bar?
I got a bunch.
Yeah, right. No, he's not in it. So anyways, we find this mission. He comes back. We're planning this thing over New Year's. Everything's ready to go. It's going to kick off on January 11th. January 11th is when the mission's going to go. And so we're inserting January 10th. We don't have too much time. We're only going to get around 12 hours of pre-raid reconnaissance. It happens, right? We understand that. And so now we're sitting there, we're arguing. We're arguing. Who's taking Bar now, Zed? Well, I'm taking, it's my turn, right? He just came back. It's my turn. Send me, right? We're arguing big time. And we go back and Kevin says, okay, we've done this before. So he has the AFIs. We don't have currency out there. So the AFIs like POGs basically. And there was a POG with a sniper on it. It had a sniper in a ghillie suit picture. And he's like, all right, same deal goes. This is AJ. Heads is yours, right? You get the mission and tails, Matt gets it, right? And so flips the coin and this time it's tails. And Matt gets the mission. And I'm pissed. I'm lobbying for it big time. And so we're both getting ready. Our teams are prepping. I still have pictures from that day. All getting ready. We knew we were going to a fight. Matt was armed to the teeth. I was armed to the teeth. So we go through this whole process. And then Matt inserts first. And he's inserting with Hueys. And so we have the new Yankees on station. So we're flying with those things. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to do dummy drops, right? And as a pilot, you understand dummy drops. For a reconnaissance team, it's very important to do dummy drops because it helps conceal where our locations are at or where we get off of the bird. The problem that we had was the Taliban hated us. They called us tree people, and they hated us so much because they always knew that we were there, but they never knew where we were at. And they would constantly try to hunt the tree people. They were looking for us because we could pick up their chatter or whatever it was. And so we planned 4 drops for Matt. 1 was a dummy, 2 was the first drop, 3 was a dummy, 4 was the last drop over a large swath of area. Unfortunately, when the birds landed, I remember watching this because the birds landed. I was watching over drone feed because I'm next to go out. I'm watching him go in, and the birds are sitting there. And I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? This should be a dummy drop, right? They're supposed to land there for 5-10 seconds and then kick off to the next one. And there seems to be something going on. And I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. In hindsight, what happened was Matt was arguing. He was arguing with the flight crew saying, what are you doing? Right? We still got 2 more places. Like, no, this is it. Right? Because there's miscommunication that happens from, we don't live at the same base as these guys do. They come in, pick us up, drop us off. Right? And so he's arguing with the crew. No, we got 1 more drop. Next one. They're like, no, this one. So they drop him off and then they don't do a dummy drop. So his whole 8-man team is kicked in there with no dummy drop. Well, the Taliban knows this. And so what they do is they hear an area and then they send teams and they associate that and they help. The Taliban is extremely smart and they worked very hard to be able to find out where he was. So they helped triangulate it as best as they could. So Matt moved in. I go in to my mission and now I'm getting a ground insert. So he went helo insert, I go ground insert. And I'm going up the valley of Nowzad, White Mountains on the east, Black Mountains on the west. And as we're cruising through, we get past the green zone rim between Kanjaki, Sofla, I think it is, or north of it. And then all of a sudden, boom, I just hit this IED. And I'll kind of, wrap this up as close as or as fast as possible. But the idea is just rocketed into the thing, ears bleeding, nose bleeding, just, dust, smoke everywhere. Don't know what's going on. I look over at my teammates. I have 2 guys in my vehicle. I had Nick Jacobs and Tyler Johnson. And I look at him and I go, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And then I'm like, I pass out, right? And then I come back awake and I'm like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And so naturally, everyone just makes fun of me all the time. This is a trend of mine. And so they were like, "No, you already asked us." And I'm like, "Oh, so there it starts my memory issues, right?" So long story, we get them all out of the vehicle. The vehicle shifts and then the vehicle lights on fire. Like an electrical fire starts in the front. The gunner is pretty concussed. We're able to get him off and down on the ground. The problem is we can't really go anywhere because we just hit a big IED, right? And the Taliban are known for leaving toe poppers to be able to maim the other people around there. We just hit and it lifted. We were in an MRAP. It lifted us into the air.
MRAPs are giant vehicles.
Flying into the air. It hit underneath my butt. Like that's where the whole, I'll show you a picture of it. The whole left side of the vehicle is sheared off.
So if you were in a Humvee, you're dead.
Gone.
You're dead.
All of us.
Anything else, basically,
anything else
besides maybe a tank. Right.
No, tank
would have destroyed it. Yeah.
Because the V-shaped hull dissipates the force, right? So it sheared the left side of the vehicle off. And these things are like Oshkosh. They're like just huge vehicles. And it lifted it probably 15 feet in the air. That's what everyone else was saying. They're like 15 feet in the air, came slamming down, right? So the gunner was just destroyed, right? He was all concussed, right? Shrapnel, right? Like teeth bleeding everywhere, right? Because he smacked everything. The driver and a driver were able to get out, but they can't really move too much. And then the vehicle shifts and then an electrical fire starts. And so we're like, all right, get out. I get Nick and Tyler out and they get out of the vehicle. And then as I'm starting to move, the vehicle shifts again and the door shuts, right? This big, heavy MRAP door. And I can see the plexiglass because there's plexiglass in the big plexiglass and I can see. And the team is like banging on the door trying to get me out. And the fire is starting to pick up. And it's moving from the front of the vehicle towards the back of the vehicle. And this was a 50 cal variant. So it has a lot of ammo in the middle of the vehicles to feed the 50 cal. And so it's starting to move towards the 50 cal. And I'm looking real nervous at this moment. Now I'm trapped in this thing by myself. And as this thing continues to move, I look down and I'm wearing a quarter ghillie. So I'm wearing a ghillie suit, right? Which is not good for this scenario. I'm sitting in a really bad spot. And I'm in a flame suit in a fire. And I'm like, okay, this is it.
This is how you're going to go.
This is how I'm going to go. But I get a choice in the matter. So I'm going to take my own life. Right. So I start preparing to kill myself. Right. Getting my pistol. Right. And so I take my pistol out. Right. And I'm getting my sidearm up and I'm just going to shoot myself in the head. I'm going to keep working to get out. But if this thing happens, I'm just going to kill myself because I don't want to burn to death. Right. And the team is banging and the door is shaking. Unbeknownst to me, a gentleman by the name of Chris O'Connor, Lance Corporal. Lance Corporal is important in this because of his rank. Lance Corporal Chris O'Connor runs across this field. A 200-meter stretch from where his vehicle was at to where my vehicle was at, where there's known IEDs. I just hit one and we know there's toe poppers. He grabs a fire extinguisher from his truck, runs across this field without his weapon. We had a conversation about it later. Runs across this field. And as the team is opening the door, he gets on top. He was like, this guy like looks like a recon Marine. He's got that like square jaw, right? You know, this kind of like stoic, smoldering look. He's like from Florida. He's like beautiful. Runs across this field, right? And then helps pry the door open. And as he pries the door open, he tucks my head down, shoves a fire extinguisher over my head, and then blows the fire extinguisher and then grabs my little ass by my collar. First time I've been happy to small guy in my entire life. Grabs me by my collar and yanks me out of the vehicle, like peels out of the vehicle. Hindsight, after everything's done, I submitted for the Bronze Star with a V for saving my life.
Yeah.
He gets a NAM, which is the lowest medal that we have.
What is that? A Navy
Achievement Medal.
Achievement Medal.
It's the lowest medal. So a captain can sign off on a NAM. And so he gets a NAM, and I had to fight for the V. This is the way that the Marine Corps system works. And so he saved my life. He fundamentally saved my life. Literally saved my life. And we gave him a NAM, and I had to fight for the V. I've never been so ashamed in my life putting that medal on his chest.
I will. The Army's a bit better, but we have our own
sure.
But the Marine Corps is notorious for being stingy.
So much that Congress had to be able to step in.
I know.
And the Marine Corps still didn't do anything.
Quick question for you. I mean, when you're sitting there, I know this happens quickly, so maybe nothing goes on in your head for this, besides like I'm pulling out a pistol. I don't know. Did you think about your mom?
Of course.
You're -1, -2, maybe by that time. Like, what's going through your mind?
My team.
Yeah.
My team.
Oh, shit.
Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
I didn't want them to watch me burn to death. Right. You know, Matt. Right.
Yeah.
It's weird, man. And it's slow and it's like this almost cathartic. It was like this weird kind of thing. It was like, okay, this is it.
This is it.
It was like almost emotionless.
Damn.
Well, I mean, you live by the gun, you die by the gun.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's kind of the cost of what people tend to forget when it's like, we're going to send troops to war. Like there's an actual price to that. Right. And like these men and women that have to go through this stuff. Right. That stuff matters, man. It is real and it is raw.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you work in a slaughterhouse long enough, you become a vegetarian. So
you get out.
I get out.
And you somehow, like, you continue on this.
Yeah. Well, we have a mission, right? So now we have a decision to make. Do we scrap this thing and cancel the whole thing because the recon team can't get in? Or does the mission keep going and the recon team's not there? Well, crap. I'm not going to let the grunts go land without a recon team being over their shoulder, right? I'm their protector, right?
And you've been them.
And I've been them.
You've been the grunt.
I've been the grunt. And so it's my duty. So our team gets another vehicle and we get back in the vehicle and drive on the same road to be able to go. And we drive another few kilometers and then we start our movement. So stars are very important to me. Constellations have always been a big thing in my life. My mom, instead of reading me books about, you know, the rabbit in the hat or whatever it was, she read me Greek mythology when I was a kid. My father was an artist as well. It was always like Greek and Roman gods that I grew up with. So I always grew up understanding the idea of astronomy, right, and the astrology associated to it. So I always learned, you know, astrology, and this was always an interesting thing for me. So as a kid, I remember going to Boy Scout camp for my first time going to Boy Scout camp. It was like 10, 11 years old, first time being a week away from home. And I'm like a mama's boy.
Yeah.
So my mom comes outside and she looks at me and she says, "Hey, take a look at that. That's Orion's belt." Right. She's like, "When you look at Orion's belt, always think of us. That will always be home for us. Whenever you think of that, think of home." And so the stars have always been very important to me. So everywhere that I've deployed, everywhere around the world, those quiet moments, I'll take a look and I'll look at Orion's belt and I'll see him and I'll see Orion smiling back at me. And I know my family's with me.
Wow.
And so we stepped off moving. And it was hard because we were concussed. So I'm severely concussed. I can't see straight. I'm vomiting. My point man is vomiting. My radio, like we're goners, right? But we have to keep pressing. And so we move for another 7 hours through the mountains to get to our position because we have to have a long offset because we can't just drop a vehicle at the base of a mountain and get there. They're like, "Hey, look where they're at." So I have to have this super long offset. I remember trying to find the North Star. I couldn't find the North Star because I was seeing so much double, right, going through this process. I remember my corpsman was saying that the front three of the patrol, which was myself, my team, my point man, and my radio operator, were doing this through like the open desert. Like we're just like wildly concussed. So Toshi Conan is his name, and I'll never forgive him. We get into position and it's like 7 a.m. It's like we're so obviously a little delayed because of, you know, blown up, right? And so sun is dawning, right? It's BMNT or beginning morning nautical twilight, right? And so we're getting into position and I'm like, all right, the raid's not going to start for a little bit. We're going to get at least a few hours. We'll be there for some pre-raid reconnaissance. I'm going to catch some shut-eye. Nope. Toshi says no. Platoon mom, right, is like, "You're severely concussed.
Because you
could die, right?" And I'm like, "I'll take it." Right? You know? I'll take my chances.
It's not 100%.
Yeah. So he won't let me go to sleep. So I'm pissed. And he won't give me any headache medicine because I'm pissed, right? Man. So I'm sitting there. And then about 9, 10 a.m., the raids are about to start at like kind of 11-ish was kind of TOT. And then about 9, 10 a.m., in and around there, I hear Matt talking, right? Because I can pick him up through our VHF comms. So the way that it's really working is the HF are able to relay. So I can hear him talking to air. He's a JTAC, right? And so he was controlling the Harriers. He was controlling the mixed sections that were cruising around. And so he was talking to them, right? The Afghan conflict required JTAC. So I wasn't a JTAC. So that helped with his argument for his team position, right? Anyways, so I can hear him having conversations back and forth, but he's too far out of range for direct communication with me. So we're outside of line of sight for VHF. And then we didn't have HF at the time, that we just didn't set that up at that moment. There was more long haul comms. And so I hear him talking to Wrath, which is the Harrier section that's cruising around.
It's a good call sign.
Right?
It's good.
And so what happens is he's calling and he's saying, hey, I'm declaring an imminent tick, troops in contact. What he's saying is like, there's a lot of motion going on around my hide site. There's stuff going on. They're sending children up into the valley where he's at, and they're probing my lines. They're looking at me. They're trying to find my dead space. And then he's watching men move into a valley 2 by 2. More than 2 trips in ROE for rules of engagement for us. A weapon system trips in ROE for us. So they're doing 2 by 2, just walking into the valley. And they're skirting the rules of engagement because they know what ours are. And then all of a sudden, I look over my right shoulder and I see people looking up at me. And then I see people walking 2 by 2 up the valley. We're compromised super early. It's hard to move in that area. And a lot happened that evening that showed people that we were coming.
Yeah.
And so they sent a number of teams to come find us. And so when they found us, he's got people probing his lines. I've got people moving 2 by 2. So I have a couple of decisions to make. So I think he declares what's called, I think it was like a priority tick, right? Priority says service effectively within 1 hour. It was kind of like, hey, something's going on, right? But that goes up to higher command. And so here's a big difference. We are attached to 3-4, which is a big deal. We're not direct support. So direct support means we have autonomy and we can decide what we do and what we don't do. Attached means 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines owns us. We are another unit within them. So his call for a priority tick goes up to 3-4, and they don't deem it as a priority. I think he's declaring like whatever the classification. It's been years, right? They declare the classification. Somebody at the watch station just says that that's not an urgent tick. So urgent's like service within right now, right? There's a lot going on. He's like, Spidey sensors are going on. Now, this has been a relationship that we had with 3-4 a lot. It was not a good relationship that we worked with them and their operations officer and how this stuff kind of worked. It was not a very good relationship of trust. And so because recon teams don't work with a lot of infantry very often, and so there wasn't a lot of trust given to us in that regard. So it paid dividends, unfortunately, very poorly. So his tick was not serviced. His troops in contact was not serviced. And so that meant that both Scarface, which was the mixed section, Cobras, Hueys, and Wrath, the Harriers, by happenstance, checked off station at the same time. They were both bingo on fuel, and they had to go back and sip gas. One had to hit the tanker, and one had to go back to go do a ground refuel. And now there was a gap. So now the recon team didn't have their air support, and the Taliban knew where they were at, and they had fixed them. And so at that moment, what happens, within that time frame, before they could get back to them, this attack kicks off. What we estimate to be 40 to 50 Taliban just rushed Matt's position. And he was separated into 2 mutually supporting positions within 500 meters. That was important to us because it's hard. I think he had like 10 people in his team. You go to a barren mountain scape, like think Pismo Beach, right? And be like, hide 10 people in Pismo, right? We have to separate, right? And we briefed that very clearly to the higher command. A lot of squirrely stuff happened when the finger pointing started after action, right? Sure. I won't go into that here. But sometimes you feel like you're living in a movie when these things are happening. And so Matt had 2 mutually supporting positions that were within 500 meters of each other. And then Matt's position specifically is getting overwhelmed. They're coming up the valley in droves. And he is fighting for his life. And I hear him. I now hear the gunfire. M240 Bravo ripping off, has a fast rate of fire. RPK, pop, 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 has a different rate of fire. I can hear the same type of gunfire. Now I'm hearing boom, boom, AT4 going off, law going off, whatever, rockets fire. I've been in long enough that I know the sounds of these things, especially from 7 kilometers away. And I'm freaking out because I'm forced with a decision.
Yeah.
So I'm freaking out because I'm forced with the decision. What do I do? Do I leave my mission or do I go save my best friend who's in contact and who is yelling and screaming for air support? Wrath is coming back in as fast as possible. Scarface is coming back in as fast as possible. Tick is happening. The truth is we don't know what happened to Matt. We don't know when in the firefight he died. We don't know when Jamie Lowe or Nick Uzinski were killed. We know it was relatively early into the firefight. But I remember Matt specifically making a decision. He made a decision to stay on the radio, to control fires, to not engage in the fight, to try to bring forth to bear the air support that was flying back in as fast as possible. And I was going to go. My team was ready to move. We're packed up, ready to go. And the air support for the landing, the air assault starts landing. And our Marines, our mission lands in front of us. And now I'm forced with the dilemma. Do I go to Matt? Do I work for the Marines here that I'm supposed to do? And I have to make one of the toughest decisions of my life. And I chose to stay because that was my mission. Those men needed that. That's what I signed up to do. And I heard Matt's last calls and how I knew. So it gets really weird. I didn't know that Matt died until much later on. I heard his last screams over the radio as he was calling for fire. And then I didn't hear him again. And then I heard Kevin's voice over the radio. Kevin was the platoon commander as he was directing air from it, and they were in separate positions. And then I heard over the call eventually was that there was 2 KIA, 1 MIA. And then the air raid or the air assault happened, and I had to focus on that. I had 8 men below me who were pointing up at me. They were about 300 meters away from me, directly in my line of sight, who were pointing up and who were drawing schematics on the ground. They didn't have weapons. Afghanistan was a different conflict. It was a NATO conflict. Technically, they didn't trip my ROEs. My team wanted me to kill them, and we made a decision not to. And then as the air support landed, the air assault landed, they dissipated and moved. And that's what saved them from attacking us, because we had sources, we had methods to be able to understand what the Taliban were saying. And what the source said to us was that we just got the first team, now we're coming for the second. And so we knew that group was coming for us. And then the air assault happened. And so they scattered. And then we came down with the infantry and we fought with them through that town for the remainder of that day. And then what was supposed to happen was we were supposed to all move into Bar Nowzad. Bar Nowzad was now getting, at that point, now the ground vehicles are moving in, air support's coming in, and the air assault is happening simultaneously. Matt's fighting here with the Taliban. Now the air assault's landing. All hell is breaking loose as all this stuff is going on. And so as this fight finishes, Bar Nowzad is effectively secured during this fight. Now we have to move, I think it was 17 kilometers around this way. It was 7 kilometers as the crow flies, right? But it was like 17 in this like roundabout way. And we hiked basically the remainder of the day into the evening until we got to the specific firm base where we were at. And we kept getting reports of Bear Shark, 2 KIA, 1 MIA. And then we would, and then we were just in with the patrol, and I knew. I didn't know who the other 2 were, but I knew Matt was dead. I knew in my heart.
You could just tell.
Yeah. I could tell. And so I remember getting to the firm base where everyone was at, and nobody would look at us. None of the infantry Marines, of whom we were very close with, none of them would look us in the eye, and they would all kind of look down at the ground because they knew that we had lost a lot of people that day. And I remember it was myself, Joe Galuli, my assistant team leader, and Efrain Martinez, our platoon sergeant, who was with my team. We went over to the radio, and my team stayed back, and they were standing in a circle. And I remember going to the radio, and we all have what we call, ZAP numbers or kill numbers, whatever it is. So we don't use, identifying features over the radio. And I asked, and I said, I needed to know, who the KIA are. And at that point, it was confirmed it was 3 KIA. And so I remember getting the radio in my hand, and it was my job to do it. And then they read the names, or they read the numbers to us. And So it's really good. Matt was always meant to be a Marine. Always. So we used the last 4 of our social as one of the identifiers. So I was P1223, right? And Matt, so in the Army, they call infantry Marines 11 Bravos, right? In the Marine Corps, we're 0311s.
Don't tell me that was the last 4 of his social.
And they called the numbers up.
No way.
Yeah. And so he always gave me shit for that.
No.
So they called up India 0311.
Oh, man.
And it broke my heart.
Dude.
And so I remember walking back to my team, and they're sitting there in a circle. We're all standing in there in a circle. And now I've got to give them the names. And these are young guys. This is their first combat deployment. This is my 4th. And I got to tell them who died. And I tell them it was Jamie Lowe, Nick Uzinski, and Staff Sergeant Ingham. And there's a movie that kind of represents what this was like. The movie 300, when the general's son is killed in the first day's battle, or the second day's battle, I think is what it is. And they have this kind of vignette that talks about this wailing of this man who has lost his son in battle. And I'll never forget my team standing around in a circle. I mean, we don't know why, but we got cigarettes. Recon Marines don't smoke, but it's a thing. We were smoking cigarettes, standing there wailing, just this guttural wail in the Afghan evening. And the grunts were so kind. They were so kind to us. They would come up to us one by one, and they would just come over and they would just say thank you.
They just knew. I feel like they'd be intimidated by you guys to some degree, but they just knew.
And we have a thing that everybody's got to pull their own weight, especially when we're in combat, right? And so every time, a Recon Marine's not above the infantry. We never operate from that perspective.
Wow.
What we do is we live, breathe, eat, sleep, and die for the infantry. The infantry is my mission. And so we never operate from a place of being better than them or more special than them. They were the ones. Infantry Marines win the wars, right? Recon Marines just help the infantry. And so they were kind to us that night, and they didn't have us stand watch. They gave us the night off. And so I'll never forget that. And they came up one by one, and they'd give us a hug, and we would just wail. The tattoo that's on my right arm is constellations are very important to me. And so people get memorial tattoos all the time, right? But the tattoo that I got in memoriam for that evening was the star constellations that were above our head in Bar Nowzat, Afghanistan, the night that Matt died. Because it was the hardest night of my life.
Yeah.
And I remember bringing the team together. We were out of food at this point because I don't know what happened. I think the food literally got blown up the night before. So we didn't have any food. And I remember.
You weren't eating any more Cliff Bars.
No fucking Cliff Bars, man. Ain't no fucking Cliff Bars. So I remember we cruise into this little burnt out building or whatever it is, this little mud hut. And our team laid there, and we're all laying there. And we have these lights on our guns, right? And we sit there and we sit in the circle, and you just get so tired of crying. You're just exhausted. There's nothing left, right? And we would sit there in between stories. We had one MRE packet of crackers and one packet of peanut M&Ms. We had an 8-man team, I think, that time. And we passed around the crackers. We passed around the M&Ms. Because the rest of them had been blown up. And we would just sit and tell stories about Matt, Nick, and Jamie. Jamie was a great kid, great young Marine. Loved playing guitar. I used to play Guitar Hero in his room, in his barracks room in Okinawa. We would just rock out to Guitar Hero. And he could never say no because I outranked him. He'd be like, Staff Sergeant, can I go to bed now? No. Nick Uzinski wasn't 21, never had a drink.
Oh my gosh.
Never had a drink. We used to make so much fun of him for it.
Wow.
And then Matt Matt left behind a wife. Her name is Yasmin Ingham. And that's what hurt the most. Was I think what I struggle with the most is that Matt had everything to live for. And I mean, I have a family too, but Matt was better than me. And I wished more than anything in my life that I'd won that coin toss.
Oh, man.
Because I think that he could do so much better than I could. And so it just kills me. That's when I lay my head at night, I think of that. And I've never wanted anything more in my life than to take that back. And so after that, our platoon was hurt, combat ineffective, and we moved back to Camp Leatherneck. We got some combat replacements, some really good recon Marines, and then we went into Marja a month later.
Jeez.
And fought through Marja, which was another hellscape, another thing to run through. And we lost some Marines there as well. And it never really gets easier. Why would it?
No.
Watching these young men.
I mean, if I remember at that gala when you were telling this story, I feel like maybe it was before that, but this idea of like, you're going to just continue serving, whether it's in the public, like the political sphere.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it was that night or that solidified it.
No, I was lost after Matt. He was my North Star.
Man.
I was lost. And he was a good man. And they were good men and all of it. And so we were lost. Tyler Johnson ended up taking his own life a number of years later. And I kind of, as the team leader, losing a teammate like that, you kind of question, like, how can I have prevented this? Well, I think that the idea is I can be more accountable to my team. And the way that I've worked with my team is I continue to check in with them. They're always my team, right? And the idea is we have made a pact with one another that we're going to live a purpose-driven life. So I lost my faith in a higher power a long time ago. When you've seen the things that war has, and you experience the things that people have, and the cruelty and the carnage that we can do to one another for an ideology or a piece of land or whatever the thing is, I tend to lose my understanding of anything that would ever allow that to happen. Shane Keelian died in Fallujah. His husband or his wife was in labor with their first child. The Marines came to her bedside. Greg Run's mother was having her birthday party. Yasmin Ingham was alone in Okinawa, Japan, when the Marines came to her house. So I don't know how a God, any God, would ever allow those kind of things to happen. And so the only solace that I found was the idea of a tapestry. There's a rabbi by the name of Harold Kushner who wrote a book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And the idea was that on a tapestry, you have one side that is a beautiful, beautiful piece of art. And it makes sense. And you turn it around. And on the opposite side, it's a bunch of frayed lines, some cut short, some longer than the others. And it's this collective. It's the only thing that's ever kind of given me solace in that understanding. And so it's been hard to be able to run with that. My idea of service comes from the fact that the only thing that I know how to do now is to honor the legacy, the camaraderie, the things that the men and women that we were called to a service to do, sometimes under the guise of good, right, that we were called to do, is to be able to honor their legacy and their sacrifice by living a life of service. I think of Matt every single day, and I think of quitting a lot. I'll be honest with you. I thought of quitting today.
Man.
I did. But like I said earlier in the conversation, is that there's a legacy of people behind me that have made me who I am. And there's a legacy of people that I've worked with, that I've made them something or helped them along the way. And that if I quit, that one, I would let that group down, and two, that if I quit, then maybe they should quit too. And Matt didn't quit.
Yeah.
So that's why I've decided to continue my service in whatever way this looks like in the public sphere, and try my hand at trying to make a difference. I'm scared. I don't know the answer. And this world is full of people telling me that I can't. But I was never supposed to be a scout sniper. I was never supposed to be a Force Recon Marine. I was never supposed to hunt the deadliest sniper in history. I was never supposed to do a lot of these things. I don't need people to tell me I can't. I just need people to tell me what to do. Let me figure that out.
So you're going to have other people you got to talk to at some point, I'm sure, about this. But the day that you go back to Barnazad in 20 years, whenever it is, and we're old as hell and gray, I would love to know, like what that moment's like if you ever make it back there and see the same constellation. I was in Vietnam 5 years ago with my dad. He was in the largest midair collision in the history of the Army. So it was 10-ship flight. They were just doing training, but in between ops, he was a Huey pilot. And he was, I think he was ship 3 first, like they go up into a cloud deck. There's a command and control ship, hits the first one, second ship hits that. He has the reaction time to get out. Fourth ship hits just all of them, just fly to the ground. And so my brothers and I were back there with him first time he had been there. And much like you described your dad, I've seen my father cry maybe 3 times. The only time I'd seen him cry outside of that was at his mom's grave. Sure. That's it. And then it was in this field in Vietnam. That means nothing to anybody except like everything to him.
Yeah.
So like when you have that moment, man, I hope the next day you'll give me a call and let me know what that was like.
I hope to make the world a better place that we can allow that to happen.
I know. Oh, all right. I've got 2 questions that are quick and then I'll get you out of here. I ask everybody these. One is there anything that you carried with you when you were downrange that somebody gave you, had sentimental value, good luck charm that you just wanted to have on you?
You already know the answer to that question. My letter. So a very long story, as short as I can, because I'm the longest storyteller apparently in history, is after Matt's death, we were just lost. But we had this group of high schoolers that would send us packages, and we had like all these anonymous boxes and anonymous whatevers. And we put a poster up when we were in Nowzad. We put a poster up on this, like behind our little bonfire we made. We put a poster up and it was like, thank you for your service. And it had like, cute kid signatures and stuff like that on it. It was just really nice. And so after Matt died, we had these anonymous boxes, and it was a box where kids would just write letters from the United States. And one of the things that we wanted to do was write back and just say thanks. And it was just once in a while we would do it just to kind of keep it going. And I reached into this box and I pulled this letter out. And I read this letter from a young woman, who's 14 years old. Her name was Angela. And Angela, cute kid, sophomore in high school, right? Just writing about anything. It was like, oh, it's late at night, I can't sleep. My parents would be mad, right? I think Avatar had just come out. So she's like describing Avatar to me, right? What's the food like, right? And then she goes into the story where she says, I don't know if you know, but I'm from a place called Sunnyvale. It's in Silicon Valley. That's where all the high-tech people are at. And she says, I was taken back by a story that I can't stop thinking about a man who went to our high school, who lost his best friend in Afghanistan. And she continues in the story to describe me in an anonymous letter about losing my best friend, Matt. And again, man, I don't know about faith, man. But I reached into an anonymous box from an anonymous group in a world's way. And I pulled a box from a woman that was writing an art or a letter to me about me. And she said Thank you for everything. And so that's been a letter that I've kept with me ever since. I have it at home and I read it. When I thought about quitting today, I thought about that letter. I thought about that kid, right? Little kid from Sunnyvale writing about a thing because a world away, she can understand that somebody was loosely connected to her by going to her high school and writing this letter to him, never understanding it would ever get to him, right? About what he saw and what she felt for him. That's human connection. And I think that love trumps hate. I think that love, supersedes evil. And I think that that is what this whole thing is about. Matt didn't die because he hated the Taliban. He didn't hate the Taliban. He understood them. Matt died because he loved his team. And he died because he made a decision to stay for his team. And so who would I be to do anything less?
Man. Last question that I ask everybody, just especially for you, AJ, looking back, all these, the people you've lost, like you were in some serious battles. As you look back at those 21 years, would you go back and do those again?
Unequivocally, yes. My only regret is I have one life to give to my country.
Man, I am so thankful for you taking the time. Didn't know how tough today was for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure coming here was not high on the list,
That's
man.
right. You gave me lots of coffee.
I appreciate it. So just so grateful for the story and wishing you a ton of luck with whatever comes next with the political career.
Yeah, I'll need it. Thank you,
brother.
My friend.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that combat story. This is easily one of my favorites. AJ is a natural storyteller. His theater background, I guess, is coming in handy. Some of those acting classes. What an amazing story about Juba and obviously losing close friends. Here is just a few comments from round one on this. One was, great story. I was there in Ramadi when those guys were there. Juba nearly killed me at the government center on May 10th, 2005, Semper Fi. And that's from @KJ Spradley author. And obviously he's referring to this sniper that AJ fell. Then we have John Hughes, 2043. He goes, I love all your interviews. That being said, Chief Pasciuti and your dad have been, in my humble opinion, the best. Your own personal story is another. Thanks to all your great Americans that protect and preserve our freedom at all costs. And there were a lot of comments about enjoying the in-person format. If you just listen to this and you don't watch, you may not have seen, like, we were in person together in the same room, which is rare. We got some better audio quality. And I know that's something people have been asking for. And it's just, it is not as easy to do. And I'll try to get better at it. But thank you for all the comments. I know people did not love the fact that we broke this into 2 episodes, but it was quite long. And I asked my editor, Joey, to do a lot of work, and I didn't want him putting together 3.5 to 4 hours at once. So we broke it into 2, but I understand there's frustration waiting. I completely get it, and I'm sorry that we had to do that, but I do appreciate all of you who tuned back in. So with that, just a huge thank you to listening. I hope you really enjoyed this one. I cannot thank AJ enough, and I wish him so much luck in the future as he gets into politics, which he's going to need. So with that, thank you so much, folks. Stay safe. I'm sure I'm scaring the hell out of you right now, but if we do talk about something, then afterwards you're like, man, let's keep that out. We'll keep it out.
I'm usually pretty good at navigating, and I go to my narrative. Those things are things that are going to have to introduce. So as I hope to continue in politics, I'm very concerned on people, what they're going to ask me about my faith, and where that lies. And
why is that? Why are you worried about that?
Because we have a society that wants to be able to create in-groups and out-groups, and they want to find associations with people. And one of the largest associations is based off of a faith. And so even though the statistics say that the largest growing religion in the world is non-religion, right, or is people who do not believe in, a specific set of religion, religious values, that becomes it becomes almost like a telegraph to other people when I say, like, I am not X. That is an immediate opportunity for people to excommunicate. I mean, look at one of the things with Barack Obama when he was running for president. There was this evangelical type crowd that was like, he's a Muslim, and you're like, and a lot of people were like, okay, right, well, like, Muslims equal terrorists. Okay, not all terrorists are, well, like what we were saying is not all terrorists, no, excuse me, not all Muslims are terrorists,
yeah.
right? But it just so happens that a lot of the people that we were fighting that were terrorists, of which they didn't consider themselves to be terrorists, right?
Yeah.
They were Muslim. And that's again, you're trying to equate, causation when there's just
It's
a
not.
correlation, right?